Chapter 389. At noon the next day, when the sun was high in the sky, Wang Lu had reappeared at the edge of the royal tomb. And this time he was no longer alone. Behind him was the most powerful person in the Cloud Country, King Yunyang. And behind King Yunyang was a luxurious and spacious carriage. The carriage was pulled by an invisible force, moving steadily. Inside the huge carriage there was a soft bed. The extremely weak Princess Yunue was lying on the soft bed with her eyes closed, seemingly asleep but not asleep. The group of three stopped at the edge of the royal tomb. Wang Lu walked in the front. His non-phase sword defense had already spread out several miles away from the royal tomb, sheltering the father and daughter behind him. However, until they actually set foot on the royal tomb, they did not encounter the expected obstruction. Wang Lu thought for a moment. He didn't think that in just 2 days Yunkinjun had become so weak that he could not be seen. Perhaps it was the opposite. In these 2 days he had gained the time to breathe, completely came out from the weak period of 1,000 years of sleep, and became more powerful than before, so powerful that he could not perceive it. Just now when he resuscitated Yunkinjun, although his power was already very terrifying, he had not really reached the peak Yuanying stage. Although he had already made Wang Lu completely unable to contend against him, if Wang Lu used all of his power and caught him off guard, he could at least break free for a short time, go to a place where Yunkinjun's power could not reach, and thus save his life. For a peak Shudan stage cultivator to be able to do this in front of a peak Yuanying stage cultivator was already very commendable. However, the binding force of the monolith on Yunkinjun was getting weaker and weaker. If Wang Lu approached this place again he would be risking his life. Although he still had a life-saving card, the risk had undoubtedly increased a lot. Wang Lu did not like gambling so much because for cultivators in the long process of cultivation, if every victory was pinned on gambling, it was undoubtedly a road to death. However, if one was not willing to take even a little risk, then one should not talk about immortal cultivation. Immortal cultivation was originally a heaven-defying act. There was absolutely no absolutely safe way to ascend. But now Wang Lu weighed the pros and cons again and again. Compared to his possible gains, the risk he had to bear was completely within a reasonable range. So he was resolute. Not long after entering the royal tomb, although Wang Lu did not sense any threat, he had already focused all of his attention. Whether or not he could resist Yunkinjun was one thing, and whether or not he had the will to resist was another. After taking a few steps, Yunkinjun's voice rang in Wang Lu's ears. "You really did as you said, but what are these 2 ants that you brought?" "A king who has lost his virtue, and a mortal who is about to die. Where is your so-called princess with heavenly spiritual roots?" Yunkinjun's voice contained a hint of ridicule. Clearly, he had already recognized that Princess Yunue was the heavenly spiritual root princess that Wang Lu had mentioned. But at the same time, Princess Yunue's true aptitude could not be hidden from him. If Yunkinjun was not interested in Wang Lu, a mere peak Shudan stage cultivator who was able to fight against a peak King Pill Corpse controller, he would have made Wang Lu pay the price for his nonsense the moment he discovered Princess Yunue. But now he needed a reasonable explanation. The king who has lost his virtue is just a prop today. As for the princess with heavenly spiritual roots, she is in the carriage, my respected senior. Wang Lu indifferently smiled. What a joke, do you think we are all blind? At this time, the gnome with a hoarse voice jumped out and fiercely glared at Wang Lu, then at King Yunyang in the carriage behind him, and then at the 3 people with incomparable hatred. That woman only has the aptitude of earthly spiritual roots at most, and it is even lacking. At this time she is poisoned and on the verge of death. Do you intend to use her to fool us? Wang Lu faintly smiled. Do you think you are worthy of being mentioned together with Senior? When I am talking to Senior you should withdraw. Wang Lu showed a moderate amount of respect to Yunkinjun, but he was unscrupulous towards the gnome. Although Yunkinjun had a certain preference for the gnome, he obviously did not care about his face. Listening to Wang Lu, instead of getting angry he became even more curious. And in his eyes the gnome was somewhat of an eyesore. Yunchang, you withdraw. Ancestor, but... The dwarf named Yunchang tried to distinguish between them, but an invisible force came crashing down on him, causing all the bones in his body to shake. He no longer dared to say another word and just awkwardly escaped from Wang Lu's line of sight. At this time Wang Lu said, "As you can see, the aptitude of the current Princess Yunue is at most a defective product among the earthly spiritual roots. But this is not surprising because right now she is only a semi-finished product. There is still one more step to complete. You cannot use the standard of a finished product to demand a semi-finished product." These words made Yunkinjun want to laugh. Semi-finished product? Can a heavenly spiritual root be a semi-finished product? Wang Lu nodded. Of course there is. As you know, many cultivators' spiritual roots are acquired through awakening. Before awakening, they are no different from mortals. And there are also some people who seem to have awakened their spiritual roots, but in fact they are not completely awakened. If they can be guided correctly, you can see their true brilliance. Yunkinjun sneered. Ridiculous. Wang Lu seriously replied, on the issue of spiritual roots, please believe in my professionalism. My sect is second to none in the entire immortal cultivation world in dealing with the issue of high-level spiritual roots. For example, me. While speaking, Wang Lu suddenly took a deep breath. Inside his jade mansion, a void core that was about to turn from virtual to real began to crazily shrink, causing the surrounding spiritual energy within a radius of hundreds of miles to rush toward one place like a stormy sea. And Wang Lu's simple breathing caused a terrifying spiritual energy tide, which greatly surprised Yunkinjun. What is your qualification? Originally, in Yunkinjun's eyes, Wang Lu should be an earthly spiritual root. His non-phase method had a certain concealment effect on the attribute of his spiritual root. However, this spiritual energy tide was something that even a common heavenly spiritual root could not compare to. Yunkinjun had never heard of this before and was almost dumbfounded. Yunkinjun's innate talent was not excellent, but it was similar to Princess Yunue's. It was just that his acquired painstaking cultivation and fortuitous encounter allowed him to reach a realm that the vast majority of cultivators could never reach. Therefore, he did not particularly care about common earthly spiritual roots. However, the qualification shown by Wang Lu was far beyond his imagination. This is the void spiritual root. Wang Lu faintly smiled. Before I was truly stimulated, I was just a cultivator with earthly spiritual root. But now you can see it. Wang Lu's words really made Yunkinjun sink into contemplation. Wang Lu struck while the iron was hot and said, I promised to bring you the princess with heavenly spiritual root, so of course, I have to bring you the freshest one. Then, I will personally perform in front of you how to let the princess be reborn and awaken her true heavenly spiritual root. Although Yunkinjun had some doubts in his heart, after weighing the pros and cons, he gradually agreed. It was just that, as a peak Yuanying stage cultivator who had established his own country in the mortal world, his thinking was very fast. Next, are you going to tell me that you need my help with this method of rebirth? Wang Lu said with a smile, sure enough, I can't hide it from Senior. There are indeed some things that I need your help with. Regarding the method to perfectly stimulate the recessive spiritual root, although I understand the principle, my cultivation base is not high enough, so I can't skillfully use it. At least in this case, I don't have full confidence that I can perfectly stimulate the latent talent of a poison princess. Yunkinjun was silent for a moment and then said, you want me to help her detoxify the poison? Just for this? The key is that I have to use magical power to directly extract the poison from her body. I can't use the 10,000 spirit blood to fight poison with poison. That will likely have an unpredictable impact on my next work. So that's how it is. A mortal poisoned by the carrion grass can't be detoxified with the 10,000 spirit blood. Wanting to use magical power to save her life is indeed not an easy task. But, is this really a necessary step to awaken the heavenly spiritual root? Yunkinjun asked with some interest. Wang Lu said, regardless of whether it is or not, how much of a loss would it be for Senior to detoxify her? Fine, I will help you this once. Just as Yunkinjun's voice fell, the sound of Princess Yunua's painful coughs resounded in the carriage. At the same time, a faint black fog also rose from the carriage, as if it was pulled out by an invisible force. Seeing this, Wang Lu's eyes narrowed. This Yunkinjun's recovery speed was even faster than what he expected. He was able to casually catch the fatal poison of the rotten corpse grass. This method was indeed brilliant, exceptionally brilliant. Now the poison in her body has been removed. Do whatever you want to do. Wang Lu nodded, turned around and waved his hand. The spacious carriage immediately opened up, revealing a large soft bed inside. Princess Yunue, dressed in splendid attire, was sitting timidly on the soft bed. Her face was pale and looked very weak, but her expression showed a firmness that did not match her age. Then Wang Lu did not go straight to the soft bed, but came to the side of King Yunyang and stared at him. At this time, under the gaze of Wang Lu, King Yunyang seemed to be in a trance. Wang Lu snapped, even now, do you still want to hesitate and act like a little girl? Being roared by Wang Lu, King Yunyang's whole body shook, and the confusion in his eyes was gradually replaced by clarity. This king, who had been in power for decades, finally found his decisiveness. He handed a delicate sachet to Wang Lu. Wang Lu took the sachet, turned around and came to the bedside. Princess Yunue, do you know what you will face next? Princess Yunue had just recovered from a serious illness and was still very weak. She could only reluctantly nod, unable to open her mouth. Very good. With a solemn look, Wang Lu handed the sachet to Yunue. However, at the same time, Yunkinjun suddenly shouted, "What is in that sachet?" A surge of invisible force came at him, but Wang Lu just happened to take a step to the side. Seemingly intentionally or unintentionally, he managed to cut off that force. Although he was shaken to the point of bleeding from his 7 orifices, the sachet finally fell into Yunua's hand. The next moment, Yunkinjun's roar shocked hundreds of miles away. Could you dare? In the face of the wrath of an ancestor who was close to deity stage, Wang Lu was calm and composed. His non-phase sword defense set up an impregnable defense, firmly protecting King Yunyang and his daughter. Then, he slowly turned his head and looked at the distant stone tablet that should have been broken. Like a ripple of water, it slowly repaired the broken place. The characters on its surface also gradually lit up, releasing an unparalleled power. At this point, Wang Lu finally laughed out loud. Of course I dare. To deal with a prisoner, why wouldn't I dare? Chapter 390. The monolith in the royal tomb was restored at an astonishing speed. And along with the restoration of the monolith, the huge array that Yunkinjun had set up for himself also resumed its operation. A tremendous force that could pull all living things in the world, along the orbit of space and even time, converged on the monolith. At this moment, all the creatures in the vast land of the Cloud Country were summoned by the monolith, releasing an elusive and mysterious force to resist the source of all the threats. Yunkinjun, the root cause of your resurrection is King Yunyang's lack of virtue. Otherwise, this monolith, which is maintained by the fate of the country, would not have revealed a flaw in your resurrection. A king's lack of virtue is indeed the most serious evil act that damages the fate of the country. King Yunyang ordered his men to slaughter the villagers of his country, which is an unforgivable crime. Even 100 deaths would not be enough to atone for it. Therefore, no matter how he compensates later on, the scar on the monolith is irreparable. But conversely, the virtue of a king can make the fate of the country unprecedentedly strong, and any crack can be repaired. Indeed, although King Yunyang is wise, he has no virtue. However, King Yunyang's daughter, Princess Yunue, has the most rare virtue in the royal family: sacrifice and dedication. She is willing to use her own death to make up for her father's sin, willing to use her own sacrifice to help the people of the Cloud Country. Although her wish is immature, it is also pure. Such a virtue is worthy of being called a sage. So, when I discovered that Princess Yunue possessed such a rare aptitude, I thought of a simple solution. As long as the immoral emperor abdicates and abdicates his throne, all the problems will be solved, won't they? Of course, the abdication ceremony involves too many things. It is impossible to follow the normal procedure in a short period of time. However, there is also a shortcut. When the life and death of the country is at stake, only the king, the successor, and a highly respected witness are needed to carry out the simplest abdication ceremony, which is what you just saw. That sachet is my modified mustard seed bag, which contains the imperial jade seal of the Cloud Country. And when the imperial jade seal falls into the hands of Yunue, the virtue of the king will be bestowed to the common people, and the monolith will be restored to its original state. Even the only hidden danger, the poison in Yunue's body, was personally removed by you so that the whole thing is flawless. Isn't it very interesting? Wang Lu's complacent smile completely enraged Yunkinjun. Boy, how dare you play this kind of trick in front of me? The voice in the royal tomb was sometimes like 10,000 bolts of thunder, shaking one's heart and soul, and sometimes it was like rolling waves, gentle yet firm. Amidst the intense changes between hardness and softness, speed and slowness, it inevitably became distorted and illusory. Wang Lu stubbornly maintained his non-phase sword defense. Regardless of the thousands of changes in the outside world, he firmly guarded the area within a radius of 10 meters. And from that pure sword light, if someone was observant, it would not be difficult to see that he had already used his innate vitality. However, the biggest reason why Yunkinjun was able to maintain the three-zhang sword defense was because of his rapid weakening. The moment the monolith repaired itself, his strength had fallen from the peak to the lowest point. He was even weaker than when he was resuscitated 2 days ago. Moreover, this weakness was still getting worse. Although his roar did not diminish, he no longer had the power to control life and death. Otherwise, if Wang Lu could not even protect himself, how could he protect the two mortals behind him? After a moment of stalemate, the situation finally gradually slid to one side. Wang Lu's sword defense became more and more stable, while Yunkinjun's roar became more and more angry. "Boy, I will let you die a miserable death. You will forever wail for your stupidity under the humiliation of 10 million strange insects. I will let you receive new punishment every day, endlessly repeating the painful cycle of life and death. I will cut every person you cherish into pieces in front of you, grind their bones and scatter their ashes. I curse you. I curse you to be ragged, to have your hair fall off, to sweat like pus, to be surrounded by a stench and to be in a trance." Yunkinjun's every roar, every curse, was not only a strong sweeping sound wave, but also a profound spell, which attacked Wang Lu from all directions. And once Wang Lu made the slightest mistake, his non-phase sword defense would collapse, and he himself would die under Yunkinjun's crazy counterattack. With the means of a peak Yuanying stage cultivator, not only the intensity of this attack was astonishing, it was also pervasive, strange, and difficult to guard against. Yuanying stage cultivator's brilliant use of power was far above that of Shudan stage cultivator. It stood to reason that there was no Shudan stage cultivator in this world who could save their life under Yunkinjun's desperate counterattack. However, Yunkinjun encountered Wang Lu, the defensive power that no Shudan stage cultivator in this world could compete with Wang Lu. Although Wang Lu's non-phase sword art had only reached the 45th layer, which was far away from his master's supreme realm of more than 100 layers, under Yunkinjun's hundreds of changes, Wang Lu was able to withstand all of Yunkinjun's attacks by remaining unchanged. And for Wang Lu, this was a rare opportunity. Attacked by Yunkinjun's various means, his non-phase sword chi, non-phase sword bone, everything in the non-phase method system was subjected to an unprecedented severe test. How could a peak Yuanying stage cultivator be ordinary? Even if his power was greatly weakened and suppressed, the means that the other side could use were still far above him. Every roar, every curse contained a Yuanying stage cultivator's understanding of the way of spells and even the nature of the world. The use of power was exquisite and peerless, and the efficiency was far higher than that of a small Shudan stage cultivator like him. What was more frightening was that every attack of the other side seemed to come from a place that he could not predict, that he could not imagine. Sometimes, even when he was facing a disaster, he was still in a daze. However, it was also at this time that his 1 year of bitter training broke out with amazing results. Sometimes by relying on his powerful deduction ability to speculate, sometimes by relying on the keen intuition provided by his non-phase immortal heart, and sometimes by relying on the law of non-phase engraved in his jade mansion and sword bone, Wang Lu solved the difficult problem that Yunkinjun gave him at an astonishing speed. And many of the tricks that were difficult to understand during his bitter training at this time, one by one they were integrated, and a brand new door opened up in front of Wang Lu. Along with the rapid consumption of his magical power and the burning of his innate vitality, Wang Lu only felt that his strength was rising steadily. Because with the same amount of power, he was able to exert a higher efficiency. The confrontation with Yunkinjun only lasted for a moment, but it was as if he had experienced a long period of closed-door training, and the harvest was quite abundant. On the other side, Yunkinjun found it increasingly difficult to continue. He had thousands of means, but he could not break Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense, could not kill Princess Yunue who was sitting on the soft bed, and could not overturn the suppression monolith above his head. Under this situation, he gradually realized that he had lost the opportunity to make a comeback. However, he still did not want to give up. He was an arrow at the end of its flight, but so was his opponent. Although Wang Lu's sublimation was clearly visible, his magical power consumption was also clearly visible. He was a Shudan stage cultivator and not a king pill cultivator, so his magical power regeneration speed was not fast. Even if he was a king pill cultivator, it was impossible for him to withstand the magical power consumption of his non-phase sword defense. As long as he persisted for a while, his magical power would be exhausted. Even without waiting for Wang Lu's magical power to be exhausted, because the weaker his magical power was, the more difficult it would be to support his non-phase sword defense, and the easier it would be for him to make mistakes. Wang Lu was able to support himself in front of a peak Yuanying stage cultivator, relying on his perfect defense. As long as he revealed a flaw, the seemingly perfect non-phase sword defense would immediately collapse. However, when Yunkinjun clearly felt that Wang Lu's magical power was about to be exhausted before him, he suddenly saw Wang Lu sigh, put his left hand into his waist, took out a sparkling blue porcelain bottle, popped the cork with his thumb, and then put the bottle into his mouth. The next moment, Wang Lu's magical power was restored to its peak level. Wang Lu looked shocked, and the flaw in his non-phase sword defense disappeared without a trace. You. At this moment, Yunkin even temporarily stopped his attack and looked at Wang Lu in disbelief. Wang Lu curled his lips. Haven't you ever seen someone take medicine? Take medicine? Yes, he was an elite disciple from a prestigious sect. How could he not have elixirs? Although the elixirs that could instantly restore one's magical power were precious, he certainly had them. Thinking of this, Yunkin instantly lost all desire to continue resisting. Trying to compete with a cultivator who was filled with miraculous pills in terms of patience? What kind of stupid person could come up with such an idea? After a long silence, Yunkin opened his mouth again, but this time, his voice was much softer. Very good, it's really an eye-opener. In the royal tomb, Yunkin voice drifted like a ghost for a long time. You did use your little trick to successfully trick me once. Such an experience, even in my lifetime, is unprecedented. It is indeed an eye-opener. Wang Lu still persisted in his non-phase sword defense and nodded. Thank you for your compliment. Were it not for my unintentional scheme, Senior would have cleaned me up the first time we met. Humph, you don't have to use this seemingly modest, but actually arrogant posture to show off your victory. Yunkin coldly smiled. Do you think this is the end of it? Wang Lu said, of course not, there are still 2 tales left. One is that dwarf named Yunchang, which I need to spend some time on. The other one, are you referring to the 10,000 poison water in my chest? Yunkin smiled even more proudly. I know that Yunchang is not your opponent. In order to recover as soon as possible, I have already sucked all of his vitality. And after seeing your sword defense, I don't think that the 10,000 poison water could do anything to you. But do you think you're the only one who knows how to hold back? Wang Lu gradually had a bad premonition. Yunkin was right, he was not the only one in the world who was smart. Along the way he fought the strong with the weak, and his biggest chance of winning lay in his unintentional scheme. However, was Yunkin really unprepared from the beginning to the end? For a 1,000-year-old demon, this kind of conjecture was too naive. Just as he was thinking about this, suddenly, a cough came from behind him. A little bit of blood passed over Wang Lu's shoulder and fell to the ground in front of him. Without looking back, Wang Lu had already guessed that there was a problem with Princess Yunye. Yunkin really did hold back. Listening to the increasingly rapid sound of coughing blood behind him, Wang Lu could not help but close his eyes, feeling a sense of heroism that came from the 9 peaks of the mountain. Some things, perhaps, could not be solved satisfactorily. But Wang Lu opened his eyes and put his right hand into his bosom. There was a bottle of boiling blood. Chapter 391. The world was beautiful and cruel. The river was clear and the sea was calm, the country was prosperous and the people were at peace. This was undoubtedly a beautiful picture. However, everyone knew that the prelude to this picture was inevitably accompanied by a cruel and tragic fight. Without the bloody struggle of the founding generals and soldiers, there would be no peaceful development for future generations. In the same way, when you make a good wish, you must be aware that in order to realize this good wish, you may need to make a cruel choice. Princess Yunye was willing to sacrifice herself to achieve others, which was undoubtedly a beautiful and noble sentiment. Because of this sentiment, Wang Lu did not hesitate to take risks to design and participate in the implementation of a plan that was as close to perfect as possible. If Wang Lu's plan could be smoothly implemented from the beginning to the end, the result would be perfect. Princess Yunye would be reborn, Yunkin would continue to be suppressed under the monolith, and Yunchang the usurper would not live to the end. The Cloud Country would avoid a disaster that would affect the whole country. As for King Yunyang, perhaps after abdicating, he would have enough leisure time to start a new life. And Wang Lu, who had successfully solved all the problems, would presumably get a lot of rewards, the rewards of the immortal dreamland. But would things really go so smoothly? Wang Lu could look forward to it, but he could not plan to do so. In the face of such a complex and dangerous situation, all the plans that could be made must be done, and the worst-case scenario must be taken into account. Although 2 days was limited, at least one thing could be done. 10,000 spirit blood? When Wang Lu took out a bottle of boiling blood from his bosom, Yunkin was surprised. You actually, really got the 10,000 spirit blood? At this time, even King Yunyang did not expect that Wang Lu could actually take out the 10,000 spirit blood. Immortal, where did you get the 10,000 spirit blood? Wang Lu lightly said, in 1 day, do you think it's enough for me to collect the blood of 10,000 kinds of spiritual creatures? King Yunyang suddenly felt a chill all over his body. Although he had personally ordered his men to collect the 10,000 spirit blood for him, and had indeed caused a lot of killing, but compared to Wang Lu's understated attitude, how could they be mentioned in the same breath? Immortals and mortals were different, it was not a lie. Regarding King Yunyang's fear, Wang Lu was not in the mood to explain. Of course he could not do something like killing innocent people. Although this was an immortal dreamland, Wang Lu still had too many reasons to keep himself rational here. Although a day's time was not enough for him to collect the blood of 10,000 spiritual creatures, it was enough for him to execute the prisoners on death row in Yunyang City in advance, and there was still not enough left. Looking at the present world, even if the Yun nation was prosperous and its people were at peace, how could there not be a few people who deserved to be killed among the millions of people in the nation? Wang Lu was not a mortal, so he did not need to abide by the rules of the mortal world. The people killed by Wang Lu ranged from corrupt officials who were in charge of cities and territories, to local ruffians who committed many crimes in the marketplace. With the eyes of a cultivator he could clearly distinguish between good and evil, black and white. In just half a day he had killed thousands of people and finally he had collected enough blood. In fact, Wang Lu always wanted to laugh. How stupid was King Yunyang to let his men openly slaughter an entire village to collect the 10,000 spirit blood? If he wanted to kill people there were too many means, right? Perhaps because he had been in the position of a king for a long time, King Yunyang could not put his vision down, or perhaps because he had been a wise king for too long, he could not think of those crooked ways. And the urgency and secrecy of the matter made it impossible for him to discuss it with other people. But in short, for Wang Lu, collecting the 10,000 spirit blood had never been a problem. The problem was that, no matter how tactful and ingenious the method of collecting it was, the blood of thousands of people must contain cruelty and sin. Once it was drunk, whether it was voluntary or forced, whether it was knowingly or unknowingly, one would bear the original sin. And for Wang Lu, who needed to create a virtuous king, this was a very difficult condition to accept. Perhaps with Yunyue's good character, it was enough to offset this original sin, but Wang Lu did not want to easily gamble. Facing a peak yuanying stage expert, he must firmly grasp any chance of winning. However, if the suppression was successful there would be a bit more leeway. The influence of the virtuous king on the monolith must exceed a certain range before it would materialize. In other words, one must be extremely evil to disintegrate the monolith, and one must be a virtuous person to remold the monolith. Therefore, after the remold, even if Yunyue occasionally lost her virtue, it would not affect the overall situation. And at this time, the value of the 10,000 spirit blood could be vividly reflected. Yunkinjun was suppressed under the monolith and now he only had the strength to struggle at death's door. It was only a matter of time before he was completely suppressed. And as long as Princess Yunyue was healthy, there would be no room for Yunkinjun to make a comeback. Refining the 10,000 spirit blood into a life-saving elixir was as easy as lifting a finger for Wang Lu. He had already prepared all the intermediate materials in his mustard seed bag, so he could start refining at any time. Seeing that Princess Yunyue began to cough up blood again, he immediately took out the furnace and began to refine the elixir. The precious herbs that he brought from Spirit Sword Mountain were thrown into the furnace by him regardless of the cost. Then he uncovered a talisman and ignited the Samadhi true fire that was personally sealed by the sixth elder, which then poured into the furnace. In just a moment, a crystal-clear elixir jumped out of the furnace and fell into Wang Lu's hand. The elixir refined with the Samadhi true fire from top-rank spirit grass seemed to have its own intelligence. It spun in Wang Lu's hand and was about to put it into Princess Yunyue's mouth. However, Wang Lu was not in a hurry. After warming it with his non-phase magical power, he put the elixir into the princess's mouth. However, as soon as the elixir entered her mouth, the princess's condition immediately improved. A trace of blush appeared on her pale and purple complexion, and the flickering fire of life was reignited. Seeing that the princess's condition had almost stabilized, Wang Lu finally felt relieved. He turned toward the distant monolith and cupped his hands across his chest. "Senior, farewell forever." Ah! Wang Lu's farewell was exchanged with Yunkinjun's maniacal laughter. "Never to see you again. Ah, I think we'll meet again soon." Suppressed by the monolith, Yunkinjun had completely lost his soul-shaking power. However, this burst of laughter, as well as the declaration in it, made Wang Lu's heart palpitate like never before. He turned his head. On the soft bed, Princess Yunyue's complexion was rosy, her eyes were blurred, her thin cheeks were gradually filled with vitality, and her two protruding eyes also gradually calmed down. Little by little, she was restored to her former outstanding beauty. No matter from which angle he looked at it, the princess's poison had been completely removed, and she had just recovered from a serious illness. However, as Wang Lu poured more of his non-phase magical power into his eyes, he suddenly saw a trace of yin energy between her eyebrows. It was faintly discernible, but it did not go away. Moreover, as the princess's vitality gradually became exuberant, that trace of yin energy also seemed to come alive and gradually spread out. Wang Lu's complexion changed. He knew that this must be the trick that Yunkinjun had done in the princess's body. That old monster was really cunning. Not only did he not remove the toxicity of the carrion grass, but he also planted a new poison. His method was insidious and vicious, making it impossible to guard against it. However, this was also a helpless move. When Wang Lu laid out his plan, tricking Yunkinjun to detoxify the princess was an essential part of his plan. And in that part, Wang Lu had to put the princess outside the protection range of his non-phase sword defense. It was not that he didn't think that Yunkinjun might have done something in that part, but he really had no better way. Some things were doomed to not be perfect, but he had to do his best. Senior, it's really an eye-opener. In the face of this adversity, Wang Lu chuckled, and then his complexion became incomparably firm. Now please see my method. With that, Wang Lu took out a red elixir from his mustard seed bag and put it into Yunua's mouth. The princess let out a moan. Her whole body became boiling hot as if it was on fire. Her sweat, which had just seeped out, evaporated into water vapor. And the trace of yin between her eyebrows was strongly suppressed, unable to move. A high-rank boiling blood pill is used to prolong a mortal's life? Yunkinjun was greatly surprised. Boiling blood pill, if used on a cultivator, could make the whole body's blood boil and release an unparalleled mighty force. In this way, the weak could overcome the strong and reverse the overall situation at the critical moment. It could be called an immovable elixir. However, if used on a mortal, it would only burn them to death. Wang Lu wrapped it with his non-phase magical power and sent it into Yunua's body, using a gentle way to stimulate her body's resistance against the yin poison. However, after all, it was just a temporary solution. Coupled with the fact that most of the elixir's efficacy was wasted, it would only last for a few days before the yin poison regained the upper hand. Wang Lu's complexion did not change. No, this elixir is used to slap your face. I want you to watch with your own eyes that the woman you hate to the bone will not die. She will be alive and well, and then she will be the stone tablet that suppresses you and tramples you under her feet. Aha, well done. This elixir is indeed unexpected. However, I want to see how long you can persist in this absurdity. How long can I persist? Of course, until your face is swollen. You want to compete with me, Wang Lu, in endurance? What a joke. While speaking, Wang Lu let out a long laugh. A series of elixirs flew out from his mustard seed bag and danced around Wang Lu like a rainbow. This string of elixirs was all the resources that Wang Lu had extorted from the elders of Spirit Sword Mountain's Heavenly Sword Hall. Each of them was well-shaped and overflowing with spiritual energy. Guided by Wang Lu's fingertips, the elixirs flew around his body for a moment and then gathered in the center of his palm. When the elixirs settled down, they formed their own array, which faintly affected the surrounding spiritual energy. Obviously, it was just a pile of inanimate objects, but it caused the wind and clouds to sweep, and all living things to respond. Under the stone tablet, Yunkinjun was shocked. Who the hell are you? Even if he was an elite disciple of a common sect, it was impossible for him to have such a treasure. That pile of elixirs was already difficult to measure in terms of value. Among them, there were several that even he, a former peak Yuanying stage cultivator, had only heard of but never seen. However, Wang Lu no longer looked at him and turned his attention back to Princess Yunue. Having just digested the boiling blood elixir, Princess Yunue became even weaker. However, she was still strong and tried her best to smile at Wang Lu. A trace of pity suddenly appeared in Wang Lu's eyes. He lightly said, "I am the one who saved your life." Chapter 392. It was not easy to be a lifesaver. There was a limit to the number of elixirs and one day it would be used up. Using elixirs to prolong one's life was truly a hopeless method. However, Wang Lu's current attitude was truly frightening. Regardless of the cost, even if the flood overflowed to the heavens and both sides perished together, he would not hesitate. You won't be able to hold on until the end. Yunkinjun's expression sank as he said, "The strange poison in her body was refined from a trace of my source. Now, it has already penetrated deep into her soul and even into her bone marrow. Unless I die, no one can completely remove the poison." Wang Lu still sneered, Let's wait and see. I want to see how many years you, an old monster, have left in your life. Yunkinjun suddenly could not maintain his composure. You are courting death. She has been poisoned by me, and it is impossible for her to continue the royal bloodline. Once she dies, this monolith will immediately collapse and I will regain my freedom. At that time I will make you die a horrible death. However, Wang Lu did not pay any attention to him. In Wang Lu's view, there was no need to waste words with a dead person. After a period of time, under the increasingly stable suppression of the monolith, Yunkinjun would not even have the strength to speak. Thus, why would he care about the crazy barking of a dog? Since there was no point in going, Wang Lu directly controlled the flying sword under the soft bed and brought Princess Yunyue, the current Yunyue queen, back. Next, he wanted to bring Yunyue back to Yunyang City and rule the world. This process might be far longer than he expected, but at this point Wang Lu no longer cared about the investment and output, and he would not consider giving up halfway. Since he wanted to play no matter what, he had to play to the end and win. Very good. When Wang Lu turned around, he heard Yunkinjun's faint and indistinct voice. Work hard to use your elixirs to prolong her life. If you are really lucky enough to delay until the day I die, then it will be considered your victory. But if you can't delay me when I escape, I swear that I will crush everything in the Yun nation. I will spread the most vicious and terrifying poison in the mountains and rivers, making this place barren for 1,000 years. I will completely cut off the foundation of the Yun nation and make everyone in the Yun nation wail in pain and despair as they die. And when I hibernate under the stone tablet, I will also continuously curse this country, curse this land. I will use all my power to permeate outwards, slowly corroding everything in the Cloud Nation. You will see droughts, floods, locusts, plagues. While you are using elixirs to barely hang on to your lives, I will slowly push everything that you hold dear into the abyss. Wang Lu sneered and ignored him. However, at this moment, Princess Yunyue slowly propped herself up from the soft bed and said in a weak but firm voice, Yunkinjun, do you really want to place such a malicious curse on the country that you single-handedly created? What? Yunkinjun smiled and said, how I use my things is my freedom. I single-handedly created the Yun nation, so naturally I can destroy it with my own hands. No, you absolutely do not have such freedom. Under the astonished gaze of Wang Lu, Princess Yunyue stood up. Her slightly trembling figure exuded strength, but her elegant face was filled with frost. This country, after experiencing the efforts of dozens of generations for 1,000 years, is no longer a private property that belongs to you alone. You do not have the qualifications to point fingers at us, and even more so, you do not have the qualifications to control our life and death. Yunkinjun coldly said, qualifications have never been discussed. If I insist on cursing this land, what can a virtuous sovereign like you do to me? Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders and said, why waste time with this kind of old ruffian? Follow me back and slowly think of a countermeasure. If there is a way to let you give birth to a child, then we will use the method of endless generations to crush him. Princess Yunyue smiled and shook her head. Then she slowly and resolutely walked down from the soft bed. However, the moment her foot touched the ground, Wang Lu sensed that something was wrong. Suddenly startled, he stretched out his hand to stop her. Don't do anything stupid. But it was too late. Princess Yunyue had already made her decision and could no longer change it. Wang Lu's hand that grabbed Yunyue only touched a ball of mist. You. Yunyue gently turned her head and smiled. Her figure had already risen with the wind. Her light footsteps left the ground, like a dancing fairy. Immortal, you just said that I have the aptitude of the heavenly spirit root. Now, I feel that I really have the heavenly spirit root. As she spoke, millions of flower petals suddenly surged out from the forest surrounding the royal tomb like a wave. They gathered under Yunyue's feet and rotated, forming a magnificent whirlpool. Yunyue smiled and took a deep breath. Then she suddenly raised her head. The flower petals under her feet lifted her up high and she soared into the sky. Such a miraculous scene made it hard for people to believe that just a short while ago, she was just an ordinary person who had no divine abilities and was on the verge of death from poison. The current her was agile and lively. She danced in the air to her heart's content. Behind her was a magnificent ribbon of flower petals. Her entire body was filled with the aura of life, as if she was a mountain fairy. As she danced in the air, her complexion became more and more rosy. The traces left by the carrion grass on her body were constantly disappearing. Princess Yunyue's beauty that could cause the downfall of cities and countries was also constantly recovering. However, Wang Lu did not have the heart to appreciate Yunyue's beauty at this moment because The miracles of the world usually came with a price. Yunyue's current elegance, rather than saying that it was some heavenly spirit root, it was more like the final radiance of the setting sun. The dancing flower petals were not gathered because of magic power. Instead, it was the gratitude of all living things in the Yun nation. They were willing to be controlled by her. Such a miracle required the right time, the right place, and the right people. The so-called right time was currently noon. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, illuminating everything. This was the time when the power of the dead souls was at its weakest. As for the right place, in the face of Yunkinjun's insane curse, all living things in the world were united against a common enemy, making it easy to mobilize. As for the right people, this was the burial ground of dozens of Yun nation's kings. Some of these kings were wise and some were mediocre, but not one of them did not love and protect this land. At this moment, the souls of the dead were summoned by Yunyue and gave their support. If not for this, Princess Yunyue would not have been able to comprehend the method of power so quickly. Wang Lu was not a member of the Yun nation's royal family, but he could faintly hear the murmurs of the previous kings. It was as if they were teaching Yunyue a brand new method of power. As the focus of everything, Yunyue absorbed this knowledge at an astonishing speed and paid a huge price to trigger this miracle. Yunyue, you've really broadened my horizons. To use supreme merit to command all living things in the world, I have only seen such a phenomenon in books before, but I never thought that it would actually happen. On the ground, Wang Lu's gaze was incomparably complicated. Apart from shock and praise, it was also difficult to conceal a trace of pity and sorrow. It's just that, to pay such a price, just to protect this country for a moment, is it worth it? Yunyue calmly said, this has never been a question of whether it's worth it or not. For a time Wang Lu was speechless. Actually, he had already guessed Yunyue's answer. In fact, without this awareness, Yunyue would not have obtained such a huge amount of merit. The law of heaven and earth in 9 regions was just so arrogant. Even though it was done with the intention to do good, it was not rewarded. For a professional like Wang Lu, the so-called virtuous path had no possibility of success. In fact, for most rational people nowadays, the word virtuous seems somewhat illusory. After the age of chaos, the word virtuous had gradually been forgotten by people. Only in the historical records were the miracles created by the predecessors. And this kind of ordinary person who could directly command all living things in the world by virtue of virtuous was very rare even in the history books. And at this time, Wang Lu suddenly noticed that Yunyue's face was also faintly changing. Perhaps the power of virtuous could really purify the body, change the meridians and cleanse the marrow. Yunyue's originally delicate and beautiful face, set off by the sea of petals, became even more beautiful. The young girl's body was gradually enveloped in a layer of holy aura, like a fairy descending to the earth. Wang Lu watched in surprise. He only felt that Yunyue's face was becoming more and more familiar. It was gradually becoming consistent with a certain unforgettable face in the depths of his memory, and that face belonged to. Just at this time, Yunyue completed all of her preparations. She spread her arms, and the sea of petals under her feet carried all of her strength and poured down. Amidst the gorgeous sky, Wang Lu's breathing stagnated. Because in his mind, that unforgettable face had clearly emerged, completely overlapping with the girl in the sky. Where the rain of petals fell, all living things became clear. The stone tablet that stood in the royal tomb, under the baptism of the rain of petals, gradually sank, until it was completely buried into the ground. And below the stone tablet, Yunkinjun let out painful howls and curses. But very quickly Yunkinjun's voice became weak, and then it was drowned in the gentle breeze. The devil that had occupied the Yun country for thousands of years, just like that, vanished like smoke in thin air. At the same time Yunyue, who was in the sky, had already exhausted her strength. Her body became faintly discernible, almost transparent. After releasing an unprecedented amount of power, she had to pay the price. It was already difficult for her to maintain her existence. This price, she did not say it out loud, but Wang Lu saw it clearly and was shocked. She sacrificed herself. And not only herself as Yunyue, but also the dozens of reincarnations after Yunyue's death. During this period, whenever this land was threatened, she would sacrifice herself to protect everything. At this moment, Yunyue had already become the true guardian of the Yun country. And how could an ordinary princess, in such a short period of time, comprehend such a profound law and raise herself to the realm of deities? This point even Wang Lu could not explain clearly. Apart from the timing, geographical, and human conditions. Perhaps Yunyue really possessed an exceptional aptitude that no one had ever seen before. Perhaps she really had the heavenly spirit root, an unknown but incomparably powerful heavenly spirit root. Ah, I knew you were not an ordinary person, but I did not expect you to be so handsome. Wang Lu softly muttered to himself, closed his eyes, and the scenes of the past appeared in his mind. Long time no see, Grand Cloud Fairy. Chapter 393. After the death of Yunyue, the story finally came to an end. In the ending stage, the plot was divided into several lines, of which the most important one of course had to be put at the end. Therefore the first one was Yunkinjun. More than 1,000 years ago, this peak Yuanying stage great cultivator who personally established the Cloud Country, after thousands of years of twists and turns, finally came to an end. Under the suppression of Yunyue, or perhaps all living things in the entire Cloud Country, Yunkinjun's soul flew away and scattered, his body and soul extinguished. Wang Lu thought that according to the general script, there would be a farewell ceremony at the end. For example, the good side of Yunkinjun would suddenly awaken, and then he would repent for what he had done and leave behind some instructions for the future generations. However, the development of things was not that dramatic. After the steel sank into the ground, Yunkinjun completely disappeared without leaving behind any complete last words. And his experience was actually the same as that of many cultivators in 9 regions. Cultivators embarked on the path of immortal cultivation, and from then on, the path of immortals and mortals were different. In the eyes of mortals, even a foundation establishment stage cultivator was as magical as a celestial immortal, and even omnipotent. However, in fact, the path of immortal cultivation was just the beginning. Before reaching the other side, cultivators were just longer and more powerful than mortals, but there was no real qualitative change. Only by reaching the other side could they truly achieve immortality, and not be like Yunkinjun, who had the cultivation base of peak Yuanying stage, but still inevitably fell into a tragic fate. Of course, if an ordinary person came to this point at most, they would sigh a few words about the impermanence of the world, reminisce about the heavy responsibilities of cultivators, and then leave. However, Wang Lu was not willing to end here. This was the most powerful enemy in the entire immortal dreamland. In order to deal with him, a peak Shudan stage cultivator, the immortal dreamland did not hesitate to create a peak Yuanying stage opponent, which was simply outrageous. Later on, although it was impossible for Wang Lu to personally defeat the enemy, every step that allowed Yunyue to sublimate into a guardian deity was arranged by Wang Lu. Therefore, half of this achievement should be given to Yunyue, and the other half to Wang Lu. After painstakingly overthrowing a powerful enemy, he could not just say a few words of reminiscence, right? Or to put it bluntly, what about dropping it? Back in the Peach Blossom Village, after Wang Lu overthrew the Demon King, he did collect some spoils of war. Although most of them were just miscellaneous items that were not worth mentioning, there were still some. And where were Yunkinjun's spoils of war? Since Yunkinjun himself did not stay behind, Wang Lu decided to do it himself. He broke the ground at the place where the stone tablet sank. To put it simply, he had entered the tomb of the Cloud King. Tomb robbing itself was not worth advocating, but there were too many secrets hidden in the Yun nation's royal mausoleum, so people had no choice but to go and see for themselves. And in the tomb of the founder of the Yun nation, Yunkinjun, Wang Lu finally found his spoils of war. 9 Revolutions Undying Art. In the empty coffin of Yunkinjun, Wang Lu found a purple book with 5 words written in dirty handwriting. Opening the book, Wang Lu quickly read through the content. The second half of the book was blocked by a restrictive spell, so he could not read it. He needed to meet all kinds of conditions. And the content of the first half of the book was enough for Wang Lu to make a judgment. This was a valuable, evil technique. The reason why Yunkinjun could live for 1,000 years at the end of his life was because he cultivated the 9 Revolutions Undying Art. According to the records of this technique, each revolution could make a person reborn. Yunkinjun had been painstakingly cultivating for 1,000 years and had already completed the first 4 revolutions. And the vitality obtained from this technique was just enough to offset his normal consumption, which allowed him to live for more than 2,000 years. An ordinary Yuanying stage cultivator had a lifespan of at most 600 to 700 years. Yunkinjun having a lifespan of 1,000 years was already half a step into the deity transformation stage. Moreover, a supreme who had just entered the unity stage could only live for 2,000 years. Currently, the oldest cultivator in 9 regions, South Pole Immortal Wang, had a lifespan of more than 4,000 years. Many people exclaimed that it was inconceivable and strongly demanded that he be listed as a research object. However, Yunkinjun, a peak Yuanying stage cultivator whose aptitude was not considered to be the best and whose cultivation method was only first class, was able to extend his lifespan by 2 times because of the 9 revolutions' undying art. And this was just the 4th revolution. What if it was Wang Lu himself? According to Wang Lu's plan, in the most conservative case, he should be able to reach the deity transformation stage or even the unity stage within 100 years. Although it was too slow compared to great ancestor Dishing and immortal Qin, it was already very fast in the post-Deism Age 9 regions. And according to his calculation, without considering the extreme case, such as using a large amount of innate vitality regardless of the cost, he should be able to live for more than 3,500 years. Although non-phase method was not a method that specialized in prolonging one's lifespan, because too much of the content of this method consumed innate vitality, Wang Wu had also adjusted and perfected this method. In this case, if he cultivated the 9 revolutions' undying art, he could at least complete the first 7 revolutions, and by then his lifespan would be more than 7,000 years. And if Wang Lu advanced to the Mahayana stage and completed all 9 revolutions, he would become a veritable giant throughout the ages. And this giant throughout the ages also had another name in the historical records: True Earth Immortal. It was just that, there was no perfect thing in this world. Just like non-phase method, behind its invincible defensive power, its offensive power was greatly damaged. The 9 revolutions' undying art allowed a cultivator to be reborn and prolong their lifespan, but the price was that, while being reborn, the cultivator's temperament would also be renewed. In other words, the reason why Yunkinjun's temperament changed 1,000 years after his death was not only because he couldn't get rid of the evil thoughts of advancing to the deity transformation stage, but also because he cultivated the 9 revolutions' undying art. The reason why he set up the steel before his death was actually because he was afraid that he would completely lose control of himself after cultivating the 9 revolutions' undying art. Otherwise, with the strength of a peak Yuanying stage cultivator, there were too many ways to make him disappear in a puff of smoke, so why bother to design a steel? Yunkinjun was just eager to live a long life. Knowing the risks, he still wanted to try it. Unfortunately, despite his many efforts, it still led to a tragedy. A great cultivator of his generation eventually died as an evil devil. Regarding this method, Wang Lu was of course interested, but he didn't intend to cultivate it immediately. The side effect was too strong, and Yunkinjun's example was not something that he could ignore. Therefore, instead of taking the risk himself, it was better to let the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall carefully study it before he could enjoy the finished product. Moreover, for Wang Lu, lifespan was actually not that important. Because in his view, only those whose qualifications were not enough to ascend to immortality in a short period of time, deeply afraid that their lifespan would be exhausted on the path of immortal cultivation, would do everything possible to prolong their lifespan. For Wang Lu, the so-called lifespan was nothing more than more Xiantian Yuan Qi that could be squandered. Of course, the value of this method to him was only average, but he believed that the majority of people would scramble for it. If he contributed this method to the Wanxian League or sold it to the mysterious Sky Mansion, he would be able to obtain a considerable amount of profit. This was a lot of hard work, but with this 9 revolutions undying art, Wang Lu's effort was worth it. Not to mention, for Wang Lu, the real harvest was something else. I really didn't expect it to be you, Grand Cloud Fairy. Beside the clear lake, Wang Lu muttered to himself. Grand Cloud Fairy for Wang Lu had an extraordinary significance. Not only because of her peerless appearance, which shocked Wang Lu like never before, but because for the first time Wang Lu experienced his own powerlessness. Grand Cloud Fairy used the 1,000-year ripple to pass on her power to Wang Lu, which allowed him to ascend to the Shudan stage. That was one of the few times that his cultivation base soared, but the price was the fairy's death. With the situation that Wang Lu faced at that time, reaching the Shudan stage was necessary, but if he could choose, he really wanted to let the fairy come back to life, and then he would try other methods to solve the crisis of Grand Cloud Mountain. But now it seemed that everything was predestined. He personally sent Yunue to the path of sacrifice, and then Yunue reincarnated for dozens of generations, and whenever necessary she would sacrifice herself. And then Wang Lu witnessed the death of Grand Cloud Fairy in front of him. What an ironic story. However, after realizing this, Wang Lu did more things. This lake is the place where you and I met and parted. Wang Lu said with a self-deprecating smile. In fact, I should have discovered that the Yun country is actually the Grand Cloud Mountain of the future, and the terrain is quite similar. In this world there is no immortal dynasty. After your death, it seems that the Yun country did not persevere for too long, but you protected this land and the creatures on it until we met. At that time, after you dissipated, I picked up a white stone by the lake as a souvenir. For so many years I have always carried it with me. As Wang Lu said this, he took out the stone that he had treasured for many years from a special place in his mustard seed bag. It's funny, when I collected it, I still had an unrealistic hope. I hoped that one day, when my power was strong enough, I could trace back to you through this stone and resurrect you. I was thinking that, with the fate between you and me, perhaps among the thousands of stones by the lake, I would be able to get a special one. All of this is just wishful thinking. Just like after I left the Grand Cloud Mountain, I put your matter at the back of my mind in a few years. In this world, there are not so many unique people that can't be without you. However, fate is fate. With that, Wang Lu stepped on the lake, treading on the waves, and floated to the center of the lake where the phosphorescent light shone. Then he wrapped the stone with his non-phase magical power and suspended it in mid-air. On the lakeside, a breeze blew, blowing petals. Wang Lu gently inhaled, and the void core in his jade mansion stirred, triggering a tide of spiritual power. The surrounding spiritual energy was intangible, so most of the petals were not affected. They fell on the lake with the wind like a drifting boat. However, there were also some that came along with the spiritual energy and flew to the front of Wang Lu. Wang Lu stuck the petals on the white stone, feeling a trace of familiar aura, and then put the stone on his cheek and then sank it to the bottom of the lake. Grand Cloud Mountain, let's meet again in thousands of years. With that, Wang Lu stepped forward and flew ashore. Finally, there's only one thing left. On the shore, Wang Lu released his non-phase sword chi, dug a lot of huge holes, and then took out a bunch of things from his mustard seed bag to fill them. Inside, there were all kinds of precious works of art, jewelry, whose value would continue to multiply with the passage of time, as well as precious spirit plant seeds with a growth cycle of thousands of years. My cultural relics and spirit plants, let's meet again in thousands of years. Chapter 394. When he came out of the immortal dreamland, Wang Lu suddenly felt particularly tired, as if he had been trained by his master on the non-phase peak for a whole night in the past year. After consecutively breaking through the 2 rings, Wang Lu really needed a period of rest. In addition to the mental exhaustion, he also needed to use his innate vitality to refine the non-phase sword to contend against Yunkinjun, which was also an amazing feat. Afterwards, he needed to recuperate for a long time. However, sleeping or recovering his magical power in the meditation land provided by Plentiful City at a high price was too inefficient. Besides, he still needed to confirm something as soon as possible, so he didn't want to delay even a moment. Therefore, Wang Lu went directly to the Plentiful City branch of the Shunfeng line. In this organization that specialized in logistics work, through his privilege as a member of the Plentiful City Management Committee, he opened a transmission array at the cost price and went straight to the Grand Cloud Mountain. This kind of long-distance transmission array was not easy for cultivators. The simple distance was not terrible, but the terrible thing was that 9 regions was huge and the terrain was ever-changing. There would often be special situations between 2 places, and it was difficult to have a stable spell that could guarantee the safety of long-distance transmission. The Shunfeng line had the deepest study in this field and operated for the longest time. They almost monopolized the logistics business in 9 regions, but only in a few particularly valuable places would they lay an interstate transmission array. After entering the Grand Cloud Mountain through the transmission array, Wang Lu immediately found the lake. After stopping for a while at the place where they parted, Wang Lu looked for the place where he had buried his treasures along the lakeside. In the immortal dreamland, he buried his cultural relics and spirit plants in a secluded place with sparse vegetation and rugged rocks. Moreover, it happened to be a place where the spiritual power in the feng shui line was relatively weak, so generally no one would come here. Moreover, to be on the safe side, Wang Lu also deliberately completed a hidden treasure array with the help of a precious talisman. The so-called hidden treasure array was a special storage and concealment spell, which could hide and protect the designated treasure of the cultivator. Only with a specific password and spell could the concealment be lifted. It was usually used by big sects to store strategic resources. Wang Lu used a treasure concealing array to hide his cultural relics and spiritual plants. Generally speaking, as long as there were no accidents, even if thousands of years passed, it would not be discovered. In fact, in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, similar stories emerged one after another. Some lucky cultivators found a treasure array left by their predecessors in the wilderness. It was a strategic resource left by some sects hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, before they could use it, the sect itself disappeared due to an accident. And for Wang Lu to bury the treasures for thousands of years, the risk he had to bear was not small. After all, the 9 states was vast and strange things happened one after another. After thousands of years, anything could happen. However, rather than saying that Wang Lu's action was an investment or speculation, it was more of a confirmation, a necessary confirmation. He had to know whether what he did in the immortal dreamland would really affect what happened later. The last scene of the establishment of the Yin-Yang sect in the first ring of Peach Blossom Village shocked him so much that it almost overturned his worldview. Time reversal? This was a miracle that had never been clearly recorded in any historical data. It was a concept that really only existed in stories. Even the most powerful cultivator could not really control time. Among the immortal methods that circulated in 9 regions, the strongest one could only reverse time for a short period of time. It was called Immortal Tea. In the legend, Immortal Qin crushed the 6 supremes in one fell swoop in an unprecedented decisive battle and unified the 9 regions for the first time. Immortal Qin could only reverse time for a cup of tea. Could it be that the power of the group of immortal tombs was hundreds of millions of times that of Immortal Qin, which could reverse time by thousands of years? And this was just the periphery of the group of immortal tombs? It was really difficult for Wang Lu to accept this inference logically. Therefore he had to confirm it. Of course, purely for confirmation, some small stones marked with special marks could do it. However, since it was a convenient investment, it would be a waste if he did not do it. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the location of the treasure concealing array, he somewhat helplessly found that he could not get the desired result. That place was no longer the rubble in his impression, but a huge pit, which expanded the area of the lake by 1/3. Wang Lu tried to dive to the bottom of the lake, but he still found nothing. This made Wang Lu quite depressed. Judging from the traces at the scene, there should have been an unusually huge energy explosion in this place in the past thousands of years. At least, it was the full power strike of a king pill or even a Yuanying stage cultivator, which turned the mountains far and near as well as a large area of the lakeside into nothingness. The lake water poured into the pit and formed a new lake. During this period, everything that Wang Lu buried naturally could not be spared. It was indeed discouraging for all the investments to vanish in a puff of smoke. However, for Wang Lu this was actually not a big deal. Although those cultural relics were valuable, most of them were nothing more than mortal tools. As for spirit plants, the really rare ones were the spirit plants that had grown for thousands of years. As for the seeds, 7th uncle could have as many as he wanted. What really made Wang Lu depressed was that he was completely unable to confirm whether the group of immortal tombs had really gone back in time or not. What made him even more depressed was that, judging from the traces, the history of this new lake should be about 100 years. In other words, the last time he came to Grand Cloud Mountain, the pit had already appeared, so he should have seen it. However, in the immortal dreamland, Wang Lu really had no impression of it, so he could not remember it. Now that he thought about it, when he was baptized by the 1,000 years ripple of Grand Cloud Fairy in the lake, his cultivation base skyrocketed, during which his primordial spirit was cleansed, and he could clearly sense the surrounding. Although the area of the lake was vast for a Shudan stage cultivator, if he went all out, he could barely cover it. However, the significance of Grand Cloud Mountain for Wang Lu was extraordinary, so his memory of this place should be very deep. Unfortunately, no matter how deep the memory was, it could not resist the erosion of time. Even the voice and smile of Grand Cloud Fairy had become blurred, let alone a calm lake? Perhaps only after achieving the King Pill and further cleansing and condensing of primordial spirit, could one truly have a photographic memory no matter how big or small. For a Shudan stage cultivator, Wang Lu's memory was already amazing enough. It was just that, for the top student of Spirit Sword sect, it was somewhat ironic that he chose to bury the treasure in an area that had been destroyed in the future. Forget it, this matter ends here. I'll try it again later if I have the chance. After wandering around the lakeside for a moment, Wang Lu no longer wasted time. He took out a new flying boat from his mustard seed bag and then flew south, returning to the sect. The above is my experience in these 2 rings of the group of immortal tombs. On the stellar peak of Spirit Sword Mountain, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall gathered in the sect leader's bamboo room, quietly listening to Wang Lu talk about his adventure. Most of their faces were filled with praise and amazement. Passing through these 2 rings in succession, moreover, the plot completion was perfect, and he even witnessed the supreme miracle of time backtracking. This kind of means and achievement could be called as shocking. Right now, the group of immortal tombs had been explored by the elite cultivators of 9 regions for more than a year, but no one could achieve what Wang Lu did. The Xingjing sect development team led by Qianghua was currently in the limelight. So far they had passed through more than 10 immortal dreamlands, but they had never triggered the hidden plot. Moreover, Qianghua was a team player while Wang Lu was a solo player. Although there was also the factor of Qianghua not going all out, in contrast, there was no doubt that Wang Lu was more dazzling. However, such an amazing achievement did not get too much praise. It was not that the elders were stingy with their praise, but everyone knew that it was unnecessary. For Wang Lu, achieving such a result was normal. The reason why there was no similar achievement in the previous exploration of the group of immortal tombs was that he did not make a move, that was all. Uncle Sect Leader, this is the ancient method that I got in the immortal dreamland of Cloud Country. According to my preliminary judgment, this is a high-rank method with considerable research value. It's just that the side effect is too strong, so it's not recommended for our disciples to rashly practice it. The sect leader took the 9 revolutions undying method from Wang Lu, put on the Kunlun mirror, and swept his eyes over the ancient book. He then nodded and said with a smile, "Little Lu has really picked up a treasure. I'm afraid this is an improved method from the demon race." The young 9th elder, Hua Yun, curiously reached out to take the ancient book and flipped it open. Demon race method? Isn't that very rare? Feng Yin said, after the great war of immortals and demons, the demon race method was basically destroyed. Although many sects would collect it privately, it was only for research reference. After all, the difference in physique between demon race and human race is too big. Their method could not be cultivated by human race. The biggest use of collecting the devil race's cultivation methods is to prevent us cultivators from being caught off guard when the devil race makes a comeback in the future. However, this method is different from the general demon race method. This is the finished product that has been carefully improved by a highly intelligent person. It absorbs the classics of the demon race method and integrates it with the quite brilliant human method as the foundation so that human cultivators can also cultivate it. However, the side effect is indeed a bit too big. Each revolution will greatly distort the mind, which is irrelevant to the bloodthirsty demon race. However, human beings are not such simple creatures. If the mind is forcibly distorted, are they still human beings? Feng Yin shook his head. This 9 revolutions undying method was mostly used for theoretical research, not for practical cultivation. When I saw the 8th and 9th revolutions, there were too many whimsical things. If you continue to cultivate according to this method, you may not be able to prolong your life, but it is very likely that your body will explode and you will die. Listening to the sect leader speak with confidence and composure, Wang Lu was slightly surprised. According to his assessment, the cultivator who could write this 9 revolutions undead method was at least a deity stage cultivator. However, the sect leader was able to see through the entire truth and falsehood of the ancient book. Sure enough, this old guy couldn't be regarded as a deity stage cultivator. But this method can indeed provide people with a lot of fresh ideas. Lu Xian, Hua Yun, you two take some time to study it in depth and perfect it for our Lingjian school's method. Then Wang Lu, about the time reversal you mentioned, I still need to confirm some details. Chapter 395. After leaving the Stellar Peak, Wang Lu returned to Non-Phase Peak to rest for 2 days, and then set foot on the road to Plentiful City. Regarding the issue of time going back, Feng Yin Taoist Master did not give a definite answer. Whether the group of immortal tombs really had the ability to go back in time was still an unsolved mystery. First of all, as far as Feng Yin Taoist Master knew so far, only Wang Lu had really triggered such an earth-shattering vision. As for other people, although there were also individual strong people who could perfectly pass the immortal dreamland and even trigger the hidden plot, most of them found it difficult to complete the hidden plot. Secondly, even if they did complete it, it did not involve going back in time. According to the analysis of Feng Yin Taoist Master, the main reason was that the progress of the group of immortal tombs was not enough. The immortal dreamland that could produce the time going back in time was not everywhere in the group of immortal tombs. It must meet specific conditions. And the number of samples was too small, so it was difficult to make a reliable inference. Secondly, in theory, going back in time was not completely impossible. Although the limit of Immortal Qin's ability was the Immortal T, at the time of the decisive battle, he was only a supreme and had not ascended to immortality. Moreover, the Immortal T was an immortal method that he could release alone, while the group of immortal tombs was painstakingly built by the Dixian people using the Feng Shui line of 9 regions as the foundation, which was a magnificent miracle that had never been recorded in any historical records. Thus, its power was likely to have undergone a qualitative change. Finally, although the current theory could not explain the time going back and the causal chaos that it brought, a qualified academic researcher must first learn to respect the objective facts. And at present, There was no clear evidence to support or falsify the time going back. The only thing that could provide further evidence was the heavenly silk headscarf left in Peach Garden Village. The appraisal result of Yin and Yang school would greatly affect the conjecture of going back in time. However, it had been a few days since Tiandao Lan and the others returned to their sect, during which there was no new news. Obviously things had changed. But this matter had already exceeded the scope of the disciples, so the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall had taken over the investigation. As for Wang Lu, his task was to clear the 36 chains as soon as possible, so he immediately returned to Plentiful City. For the next month, Wang Lu devoted all his energy to the immortal dreamland, and the result of a professional's wholehearted devotion was that the Lingjian school originally lacked 3 lines of 18 rings, but in one breath he had broken through 14 rings. Together with the 2 rings of Peach Blossom Village and Cloud Country, he was only 2 rings away from success. However, in these 14 rings, there were no more space-time reversals. Even the hidden storyline was only triggered 3 times. It was not that Wang Lu was incompetent, but some immortal dreamlands did not have a hidden plot, and Wang Lu's conditions could not meet the requirements to trigger it. According to the information he got from the map of the group of immortal tombs, some immortal dreamlands had harsh requirements for the gender and other conditions of the cultivator. Thus, it was impossible for Wang Lu to clear all the hidden storylines. However, the most important thing right now was not these hidden plots. Just as he was missing the last 2 links, Shengjing Sect's fairy Qianghua had already led her team to break through the most time-consuming link. Not to mention the countless rare treasures, the key point was that she was only missing the last 2 links, which would be the same progress as him. And considering that the last ring of the 36 chains would be an unprecedented comprehensive, the main force would definitely be the elder-level cultivators of the various sects, while the disciples would at most play the role of bystanders. Thus, whether it was Qianghua or Wang Lu, they would really shine in the penultimate ring. At this time, the progress of both sides was the same, which was a good opportunity for a fair competition. As a matter of fact, this was what made Wang Lu eager to try. In the penultimate ring, he was ready to go all out to defeat Qianghua and open the final ring 1 step ahead of the opponent. Wang Lu had no hostility toward Qianghua. The 2 of them had basically never dealt with each other before, so naturally there was no hatred between them. As for his reputation in the past year, Qianghua had indeed shone brilliantly, overshadowing the other several lead disciples of the other sections. However, Wang Lu's 1 month of crazy strategy had also earned him a lot of points. Especially when Tiandao Lan and the other Yin and Yang schoolgirls spread the news about him clearing the hidden storylines, which made Wang Lu even more legendary. He was already vaguely on par with Qianghua, the Taoist Master King Pill, and was in no way inferior. Let alone Wang Lu didn't care about the reputation. What he cared about was the attitude of his sect. Although the Heavenly Sword Hall elders didn't explicitly say it, they were very concerned about the progress of the 36 chains. Obviously, this matter was very important. Perhaps after the 36 chains, there was a deeper level of competition. For example, there was a lucrative immortal dreamland, but only the first person to complete the 36 chains would be eligible to enter. Or perhaps, in the excavation management, the seat of Lingjian school had been challenged. In short, the sect needed to increase its own weight, and Wang Lu was the key figure to win the chips for the sect. As for the last chain, Wang Lu still intended to fight alone. The elders had asked him if he needed the help of Zhu Shiyao, Lu Li, Bai Shixian and the others, but Wang Lu had refused. Judging from the map in his hand, the complexity of the structure of this chain was far beyond the previous Peach Garden Village and other immortal dream lands. It was an out-and-out big scene. In this kind of scene, the test for the cultivator would be exceptionally harsh. The harshness was not that the single difficulty would be high, for example, to send a deity stage opponent to a peak Shudan stage cultivator. Instead, it referred to the unusually large number of test items in the complex scene, which involved a very wide range. In this case, whether a cultivator's ability was comprehensive or not was far more important than whether a certain ability was outstanding or not. It was undeniable that Zhu Shiyao and Lu Li were rare geniuses in the immortal path. In a one-on-one fight, even Wang Lu didn't have a 100% chance of winning, especially in the face of his senior sister Zhu Shiyao. It would be good if he didn't lose. However, Wang Lu believed that if they were thrown into the complex situation of the immortal dreamland, it would basically be a double kill. Whether it was Zhu Shiyao or Lu Li, they didn't have the ability to adapt to the complex environment. If it was an ordinary immortal dreamland, perhaps it would be tailored to design a simple and crude level that would allow them to crush all the way through. However, in a complex scene it would not be so humane. Once it involved intelligence, Wang Lu had no doubt that they would be crushed until not even their bones would be left. As for Wang Lu himself, his solo ability was indeed very strong, but once there were too many participants, he could not perfectly control the scene. If there was an accident, he could not afford to bear the responsibility. Therefore, instead of regretting when there was a problem, it was better to nip it in the bud. Of course, seriously speaking, among the several candidates proposed by the elders, Bai Shixian was a good choice. With her king pill cultivation base, auxiliary specialty, as well as wisdom and cleverness that were far above the standard. At any time she would not be the most dazzling one, but at any time she could be an excellent help. Unfortunately, right now Wang Lu could bring anyone except for little Bai. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, he still chose to be alone. In view of the upcoming unprecedented test, Wang Lu didn't dare to be careless. He spent a whole day in Plentiful City to purchase. As for the expenses, they were all reimbursed by the sect. This was the treatment that his master Wang Wu had been dreaming of for many years. And Wang Lu was also impolite. He purchased all the talismans and props that might be used in his current stage, even in the early stage of King Pill, just in case. As for how crazy his sixth uncle Lu Li would be after he sent back the bill, for the time being Wang Lu did not consider it. Moreover, carefully speaking, no matter how much Wang Lu spent, it was impossible for him to compete with Qionghua's team. Shengjing sect's all-out investment in Qionghua was enough to shock any other sect. That local tyrant's flash of brilliance had blinded many people's eyes. To seriously compete with such a team, Wang Lu must come up with 100% of his ability. After purchasing the last magical treasure, Wang Lu didn't waste time and went straight to the entrance of the group of immortal tombs. Along the way, many people in Plentiful City cast their attention on him, which was accompanied by the sound of discussion. At this time Wang Lu was no longer the same as before. He had a certain reputation in the entire immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. Although because his stage was not yet at the early stage of King Pill, his reputation was limited, almost everyone in Plentiful City knew about him. His every move and action in the city could attract the attention of the people. He was a veritable celebrity. Regarding this, Wang Lu didn't enjoy or dislike it. He never liked undeserved fame, and other people's admiration and envy were meaningless to him. Moreover, as a member of the management committee of Plentiful City, in any case, he would not be harassed by these ordinary cultivators. It was just that, while walking on the road, Wang Lu always felt that today's crowd seemed to be particularly dense and particularly enthusiastic. Did they all know that he was about to start a big operation, so they specifically came to cheer for him? That shouldn't be the case. The 36-chain strategy of Xingjing Sect, Royal Soldier Sect, and Lingjian School were all top-secret information in the management committee, so it was unlikely that everyone knew about it, right? However, when Wang Lu was about to reach the entrance of the group of immortal tombs, he found out that this was really a big misunderstanding. In Plentiful City, there was a large array jointly laid by several elders, which could isolate most of the perception of ordinary cultivators, making most of the people in the city like mortals. In this way, privacy could be better protected. Under the effect of this array, Wang Lu didn't hear the content of the people's discussion and cheers. At this time, when he was close to the entrance of the group of immortal tombs, he finally heard the cultivators' cheers that were no longer concealed. Qionghuo, Qionghuo, Qionghuo. Qionghuo Fairy, we will always support you. Qionghuo will win. Sister Qionghuo, I will also give you a child. Wang Lu turned around and saw that not far behind him, the team of Xingjing Sect was like a rainbow, shining with golden light. Compared with them, his celebrity character was simply dull. This psychological contrast was so strong that for a moment, Wang Lu actually froze in place without moving. Qionghuo walked at the front of the team. When she saw Wang Lu, she smiled. Long time no see. Chapter 396. Yes, it's indeed been a long time. Seeing Qionghuo coming over with a sweet smile, Wang Lu originally wanted to say a few words, which could be considered as the representative of Lingjian School and Xingjing Sect. However, after being swept by Qionghua's gaze, Wang Lu's heart turned cold. There were many things that he couldn't say, so he just casually responded with a sentence and then no longer said anything. Qionghuo and Wang Lu were just acquaintances. Seeing that he didn't want to complicate matters, she cupped her hands across her chest to bid farewell and then led her team away from Wang Lu. It was just that, before he could take a few steps, he saw from the Xingjing Sect team, a heroic-looking girl suddenly turned around and ferociously glared at Wang Lu. Feeling the fierceness in her eyes, Wang Lu looked back and saw that the girl's pretty eyes were filled with anger. Moreover, her eyebrows were somewhat familiar to him. Wang Lu carefully recalled. Since his debut he had met a lot of women, but he was an upright person and had never fooled around with other women, let alone provoked a femme fatale. In fact, even Lu Li, who was very intimate with him, he had never taken advantage of her. Therefore, it was even more impossible for him to harm other people. So, how did he offend this Xingjing sect girl, making her live as if she was abandoned by him? However, he soon remembered that he and her actually had a bit of an ill-fated relationship. Previously, in the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region, this girl and her brother were crushed by him with their IQ, so perhaps their psychological shadow had already been deeply rooted. No wonder when they met again this time, she fiercely glared at him. Sister Wang Yue, long time no see. Wang Lu's light greeting caused Wang Yu's whole body to tremble. The resentment in her eyes slightly disappeared and was replaced by a bit of fear. Psychological shadow was, after all, psychological shadow. Who hasn't seen you for a long time? Wang Lu laughed. How come you forgot? When we were in the ancient sword tomb, didn't we get along quite happily? Before he could finish, Wang Yu's face turned red. Shut up. Don't think that just because you've passed through a few immortal dreamlands, you're not qualified to be presumptuous in front of my Xingjing sect. Let me tell you after this ring, you guys. Wang Yu, shut up. At the front of the team, Qionghua's faint voice came over, causing Wang Yu's entire body to turn cold. A bone-chilling chill made her freeze, and the words that she was about to blurt out were forcibly frozen back down. Even her cheeks were covered with a layer of white frost. However, Qionghua's action instead aroused Wang Lu's curiosity. Obviously, Xingjing sect team's plan for this ring was very broad. Judging from Wang Yu's tone, it seemed that if they succeeded in this ring, they would be able to suppress Spirit Sword sect. However, what exactly was the mystery of this ring, Wang Lu didn't know. Previously, he had asked the elders about the 36 chains, but he did not get an accurate answer. It seemed that everything was just a deduction from the sect leader. Sect leader Feng Yin reckoned that this 36 chains was of great importance, and the significance of being the first to pass the trial was extraordinary. However, as for how extraordinary it was not clear just by looking at the several immortal swords. Now, it seemed that Xingjing sect's knowledge was obviously more detailed and in-depth than that of Lingjian's school. Therefore, after listening to these words, Wang Lu paid attention to it. Unfortunately, Wang Yu only opened her mouth before she was stopped. The other Xingjing sect team members kept quiet out of fear. No one dared to disobey Qionghuai even half a bit. Seeing this situation, although Wang Lu was somewhat curious about what Wang Yu's unfinished words were, it was difficult for him to ask. His heart was somewhat itchy. After stopping for a moment, thinking that he had something important to do, he had to suppress his curiosity and continue to walk toward the group of immortal tombs. However, before he could take 2 steps, he suddenly heard someone calling him from behind. When he turned around, he saw the face of a bright and beautiful girl. However, this time Wang Lu immediately remembered. Turns out it's senior sister Zhou. You also came to open the group of immortal tombs? The person who came was the lead disciple of Kunlun sect, Zhou Mumu, who opened the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region. This straightforward girl once fought side by side with Wang Lu, therefore she had a good impression of Wang Lu. Seeing him, her face was full of smiles. Of course, right now, among the top-ranked sects of the Wanxian League, which one of them doesn't regard this place as their future core? All the lead disciples and elite disciples of the sects are busy, so I was wondering why I didn't see you in the past year. Later on, I heard that in this 1 month, you've passed more than 10 trials, which is better than all of us working hard for a year. It's really a brilliant feat. Wang Lu cupped his hands across his chest and politely said a few words. However, before they could chat for more than a few words, Zhou Mumu impatiently took her leave. Obviously, she also had something important to do, so she could only exchange a few words with Wang Lu. However, before she left, she said something that greatly astonished Wang Lu. Aha, this time including you, the lead disciples of the top 5 sects are all here. This is a rare opportunity, so let's have a good competition to see whose speed is faster. This time I will not lose to you. Then, with a string of bell-like laughter, Zhou Mumu disappeared behind the entrance of the group of immortal tombs, leaving Wang Lu stunned. The lead disciples of the top 5 sects are all here? What kind of rhythm is this? Is it purely a coincidence, or is there a pair of invisible hands controlling everything? Previously he only heard that Xingjing sect, Royal Soldier sect and Lingjian school are developing the 36 chains. Could it be that during this period of time, even 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect are unwilling to be left out? Well, this is normal. Among the top 5 sects of the Wanxian League, Xingjing sect is the strongest, Lingjian school is the weakest, and the other 3 sects are similar. However, in general they are all on the same level, especially in terms of high-end power. There is no qualitative gap. And with the strength of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect, it is very likely for them to catch up. However, no matter what, it has little to do with him. The immortal dreamlands of this group of immortal tombs are independent. No matter how the 5 lead disciples gather, they would only play their own game and would not hinder each other. As long as Wang Lu cleared this chain as fast as possible, the rest would be considered by the elders. After entering the entrance of the group of immortal tombs, Wang Lu once again saw the familiar vast sea of stars. After a month of clearing more than 10 chains of immortal dreamlands, Wang Lu was somewhat tired of the scenery in front of him. However, thinking that he would have to face an unprecedented complex difficulty, Wang Lu immediately cheered up. He then took out the fragment of immortal dream that he obtained when he cleared the previous chain and used it as a guide to open the next chain. The endless river of stars in front of him shattered, twisted, and turned into a huge whirlpool, which sucked him in. Wang Lu has experienced this process more than 10 times, so it was not new. It was just that, this time Wang Lu clearly felt that the other end of the whirlpool seemed to be a huge network which connected a lot of content together. This made Wang Lu's heart turn cold. Because from the previous map, this chain was somewhat hazy and unclear. Now that he really went deep into it, he felt that there were many mysteries hidden in it, which was far different from the previous dozens of chains. However, before he could think too much, the opening of the immortal dreamland had already ended, and this important part of the plot had finally officially begun. However, when Wang Lu concentrated and prepared to welcome this new world, he found that there was only darkness in front of him. This is indeed an unprecedented difficulty. From the beginning it's already different. In the past more than 10 immortal dreamlands, the opening of each and every one of them quickly unfolded the background and entered the theme, leaving almost no time for people to react. For example, in the Ring of Cloud Country, as soon as Wang Lu entered, he was chopped down by a steel knife. And at this time, in this darkness, it was obvious that something was brewing. A moment later there was a light in the darkness. Wang Lu walked towards the source of the light and saw a jade disc, which was faintly emitting light. Wang Lu could not help but be surprised. Could this be the legendary good fortune jade disc? Could it be that he could fuse with it? But soon the jade disc lit up with 5 rays of light, and from the light, Wang Lu felt the pure power of the 5 elements. At the same time, a trace of understanding suddenly arose in his mind. This jade disc wasn't a treasure that was bestowed to him, and it was merely a display of options. Next, he had to choose one of the 5 elements in order to continue the plot. And when he was enlightened, Wang Lu was even more surprised, because this was clearly a direct hint from the immortal dreamland. But before this, none of the immortal dreamlands that Wang Lu had experienced would give him a direct hint. After entering the immortal dreamland, what to do and how to do it were all decided by the participants themselves. For example, in the Ring of Peach Garden Village, if Wang Lu did not rescue them, but instead joined the monsters of Black Wind Mountain to wantonly ravage the women of Peach Garden Village, the only problem was that doing so could not be passed at all. Moreover, in a serious case it could also cause unpredictable risks. As a matter of fact, in the past 1 year of exploration of the group of immortal tombs, there were many people who could not figure out the task goal of the immortal dreamland and eventually returned without accomplishing anything. And the biggest reason why Wang Lu was able to break through more than 10 rings in just 1 month, which was equivalent to a year of hard work for the elites of other sects, was that he could accurately find the task goal every time. And this was not unrelated to the map in his hand. And now, for the first time, the immortal dreamland gave a clear guidance. This undoubtedly meant that either the plot of this ring was extremely complicated, and no one could pass it without a hint, or the plot was extremely simple, and the focus was not on the plot at all. Wang Lu pondered for a moment in front of the jade disc. Choose one of the 5 elements? Of course I choose gold. The 5 elements were in a cycle of mutual promotion and restraint, and there was no superior or inferior among them. However, if he didn't choose gold, should he choose earth? However, before Wang Lu could reach the golden light on the jade disc suddenly went out. Wang Lu was suddenly surprised. He repeatedly poked it with his finger, but there was no response. Could it be that among the 5 elements I can't choose gold? With a trace of helplessness, Wang Lu reached out to the fire, but the light went out before he could touch it. TSK, I can't choose gold and I can't choose fire either. Let's choose wood. I can't choose wood either? Do I have to choose water? I'm a big man, how could I play with water? What the hell, I can't even play with water. Isn't there only soil left? In a moment, the light on the jade disc went out one after another, leaving behind a lonely brown light. What the hell? You said that I could choose for myself at the beginning, but now you're telling me that I don't have a choice. Is this a hint or a prank? Forget it, bumpkins are bumpkins, local tycoons are also bumpkins, I'll choose for the time being. With that, Wang Lu pressed his hand on the jade disc. The next moment, the darkness receded and the light shone. The scene had changed. And in the light, a girl with a firm look was standing upright in front of him. She softly asked, I ask you, are you my follower? What? Chapter 397. Let me ask you, are you my follower? In the hazy light, Wang Lu vaguely heard someone asking a question, but for some reason the voice sounded particularly strange. Although he could understand every word, it seemed to be separated by a layer of something, and it didn't seem real enough. Wang Lu subconsciously asked, what? At the same time, the light in front of him gradually dissipated, allowing him to see the scene in front of him clearly, and the outline of the girl became clearer. She was tall and straight, similar to Wang Lu, and Wang Lu's figure was considered above average among men. In addition, the girl was covered in heavy armor, and her whole body was wrapped in shiny steel, only a few pieces of delicate leather were exposed at the joints. Through the armor, one could vaguely tell that although the girl was not sturdy, she was not weak either, and her body was very healthy and beautiful. The girl's face, like the armor on her body, was cold and firm, a pair of clear eyes like ice that would not melt for 10,000 years, and two slender eyebrows were like sharpened swords, a woman with a heroic spirit. Let me ask you, are you my follower? In Wang Lu's ears, the girl asked again. The tone of the voice was no different from the previous time. Wang Lu thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. What is a follower? On the biting cold ice, a fine line seemed to open up, and the girl's face showed a shocked expression. You don't know a follower? Who are you? Wang Lu asked. Who are you? While asking, Wang Lu also began to look around and saw that he was in a hall with a dense atmosphere. The four walls were lit with black torches, the light of the fire flickered, and in the deep hall, it was like the stars in the night sky. And under the stone slab under Wang Lu's feet, there was a circular array that emitted a brown light, illuminating the surroundings. The earth elemental spiritual chi in the air was extremely dense, and the pitch-black altar behind him was reflecting light. According to the situation in front of him, this hall should be used for sacrificial rituals. The altar behind him was still stained with a strong smell of blood. Combined with the array under his feet and the experience of appearing in the darkness just now, the most logical deduction was, at this moment, the girl said coldly, I am your master. Ta! Wang Lu immediately burst into laughter. However, before he could stop laughing, he saw the girl silently raise her arm, and the back of her right hand lit up with a red light. Wang Lu suddenly felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on his shoulders. All the bones in his body crackled and he was about to fall. However, in this sudden attack, Wang Lu's many years of painstaking practice of the non-phase method undoubtedly showed itself. While his bones crackled under the pressure, his right hand pointed down and his non-phase sword chi shot out. The recoil force surged through his whole body, maintaining his standing posture. However, the stone slab beneath his feet couldn't withstand the heavy pressure and shattered with a loud bang. Along with the cracking of the stone slab, the brown array also flickered twice and then completely extinguished. The girl was somewhat surprised to see that even under such heavy pressure, Wang Lu was still able to stand firm in front of her. After a pause, she seriously explained, it seems that it's because the sacrifice is not complete enough so that you didn't get the complete enlightenment. No matter, I will explain it to you in its entirety. The girl seemed to be deeply shocked by the scene in front of her. She took a deep breath and still maintained her calm tone. You are my summon, a blood spirit follower from the blood temple, and I am the master who summoned you. The relationship between you and me is maintained by a contract. If there is a violation, it will be the result just now. Wang Lu nodded thoughtfully. At this time, the pressure on his body gradually dissipated. However, whenever he wanted to harm the girl, that heavy pressure would follow him like a shadow. It seemed that what the girl said about the contract relationship was indeed true. This was clearly a symptom of being bound by a strong contract. And in 9 regions, this kind of summoning of servants was not uncommon. For example, the so-called celestial soldiers and generals, godly beating technique, bean soldiers, and many other spells were based on the summoning of servants from a certain world. It was just that, as soon as this immortal dream land appeared, it turned him into a follower and forcibly gave him a master. What was the intention of this? Have you even forgotten the purpose of coming here? The girl shook her head helplessly. Sure enough, I shouldn't have used the incomplete mask to summon the blood spirit. Listen, the only purpose of you coming from the blood temple is to assist me in obtaining the 5 blood spirit crown. Don't tell me you don't even remember the 5 blood spirit crown? Wang Lu said, I don't remember. The so-called 5 blood spirit crown is the most precious treasure in this world. The one who obtains it can be crowned as the king, and no one can disobey him. The girl lightly said, however, this most precious treasure can only be refined by gathering the blood of the 5 spirits, and the blood of the 5 spirits. Is it the life of me and the other 4 blood spirits? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu had a general understanding of the plot of this ring. The principle was nothing more than the same as the method of refining poisonous insect. Summon 5 powerful servants to fight each other, and then the winner would take all and take the crown. What he would face was the other 4 blood spirits and their masters, which was a team fight. The only thing that was not right was the incomplete mask that the girl said. The girl said, to summon the blood spirit from the blood temple, there must be a corresponding tool. Unfortunately, my gray mountain has been passed down for hundreds of generations, and there are only 3 to 5 blood spirit inheritances. Among them, this stone mask is the most valuable, and the blood spirit that may be summoned is also the strongest. However, it was damaged for some reason 100 years ago, so the blood sacrifice has more or less an adverse effect on you, the master of the mask. When you came from the blood temple, the enlightenment that should have been received was not complete, so you don't even know your own identity and the 5 blood spirit crown. The girl said. Although her voice was flat, there was a hint of anxiety in it. Obviously, she was not at ease with the blood spirit before her. According to her prediction, the blood spirit summoned by the stone mask could at least be ranked in the top 3 among the 5 spirits. In this way she would have the capital to deal with the other 4. Otherwise, with her temper she would not risk using the broken mask to summon. Unfortunately, the final result was still beyond her control. Could this seemingly amnesiac blood spirit really help her win the 5 blood spirit crown? While she was hesitating, Wang Lu was the first to open his mouth. Tell me about the situation of the other 4. If I want to win the crown, I have to know who my opponent is. The girl said, the other 4 are Golden City, Harmony River, Flaming Valley, and Eternal Tree. How is their strength? Golden City is the strongest. Their city master's cultivation base is through the sky, and he has millions of elite soldiers. Flaming Valley is second, and their strength is about 60 to 70% of Golden City. Harmony River and Eternal Tree are the second, but they are of the same breadth and branch. Their joint force is better than Flaming Valley, but they cannot contend against Golden City. And if Golden City wants to target any one of them, it is bound to pay a heavy price, and it is very likely to be the fisherman who benefits from the third. Wang Lu nodded. So that's how it is. This situation is indeed delicate. So what about our Gray Mountain? What is the ranking of our strength? What role can we play in this delicate situation? The girl was silent for a moment and then calmly said, Gray Mountain was once equally famous as Golden City, tied for first place in this world. However, after hundreds of generations of inheritance, it has declined. Its strength is respectfully last among the 5. Wang Lu let out a ha sound. No harm, no harm. It doesn't matter if the starting point is low, we can start low and walk high. The greater the difficulty, the greater the harvest. It's just, what is the specific strength of Gray Mountain? How is your city master's cultivation compared to the master of Golden City? How many elite soldiers are there in the mountain? The girl said, my cultivation base is at most 1/10 of that of the master of Golden City, and besides me, there are no other usable soldiers in the mountain. Wang Lu's smile suddenly stagnated. No other usable soldiers? How can you be the king of the mountain? Moreover, your combat power is actually only 1/10 of the other? Are you sure we're playing the same game? Upon hearing Wang Lu's question, the girl's expression slightly dimmed, but in the blink of an eye, she cheered up and her eyes became more resolute. It's precisely because of the decline of the 100 generations of inheritance that I want to obtain the 5 blood spirit crown to restore the glory of Gray Mountain. Wang Lu deeply abhorred this kind of illogical slogan. You can't even figure out which came first. No wonder you're reduced to a lone commander. With just your strength, how can you compete with the other 4 forces? Obtain the 5 blood spirit crown? Or do you have the supreme wisdom to ignore all forces so you can easily play with the other 4 forces in the palm of your hand? Just as the girl was about to open her mouth, Wang Lu immediately said, "How about this? Let me ask you a question. What is the 14th power of 123949127391273?" The girl was somewhat caught off guard and froze for a moment. "I can't figure it out." Wang Lu sighed even more. "This IQ, should I say it's not surprising. Then I only have one last question left." The girl nodded. "Please go ahead." "Excuse me, how do I get to Golden City?" "What?" Wang Lu explained, "A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. I'm ready to abandon the dark and seek the light." The girl didn't seem to expect that Wang Lu would actually say such treasonous words. She was stunned for a cup of tea time before she came back to her senses under Wang Lu's call. "I won't let it go." Calmly, the girl expressed her stance. "I must obtain the 5 blood spirits crown." Wang Lu also sighed. "Okay, wait until I help the master of Golden City get the crown, then I'll lend it to you to play with for a moment." Seeing that Wang Lu seemed to have made up his mind to leave, the girl pondered for a moment, and then once again raised her arm, releasing a red light. "I said I will not let go." In an instant, Wang Lu felt that the pressure on his body had increased thousands of times. Even if his non-phase method was the best at defense, he still couldn't support it. In this regard, Wang Lu had to say, "Girl, why bother? Meeting each other is fate. For us to meet here, whether it's good or bad, it's all fate. Why bother to embarrass me, a patient with amnesia? Are you happy to see me die in the hands of others and become the nourishment for the 5 blood spirit crown?" Upon hearing this remark, the girl was slightly shaken, but she soon became firm. "I'm sorry, but this is the only chance for the revival of Grey Mountain. My time is running out, so I can't wait any longer. Therefore, I must get your cooperation. You can still resist under the suppression of my 2 commands, so I'm afraid your strength is the strongest among the 5 blood spirits. If you and I join hands, we might have a chance to win. At that time, I will only take a small part of it and the rest will be yours. So, why do you want to go to Golden City and become a surrendered soldier?" Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was somewhat moved. Especially the word surrendered soldier, he really couldn't pretend that he didn't know about it. "Very well, I'll play with you. Starting from scratch is also fun." "Really?" In an instant, the snow on the girl's face melted, and a wisp of smile uncontrollably hung on her face. "I am Lon, the master of Grey Mountain. I will definitely win the crown with you, definitely." Chapter 398. Lan's determination was indeed commendable. It could be seen that this heavily armored girl, in addition to her determination, also had the courage to carry it out. Her freezing cold murderous intent showed that she had experienced the test of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, and was by no means a person who could only talk big. In other words, now that Grey Mountain had withered, she was the only one left, but she alone was able to prop up Grey Mountain, which meant that her strength could not be underestimated. However, even if more positive factors were considered, Wang Lu did not think that his situation could improve a bit. Among the 5 forces, Grey Mountain was the weakest, so weak that it could be destroyed at any time. Even Lan herself said that it was the other 4 forces that could form a delicate situation that no one dared to make a move at will. Only Golden City, Eternal Tree, and the other 2 forces could keep each other in check. As for Grey Mountain, it could really be trampled to death at any time. It was not even qualified to be an equal force in the competition. Therefore, when he heard Lan sincerely expressed her determination to win the crown together with him, Wang Lu wanted to ask, based on what? Based on the number of people that Grey Mountain could count with his 2 fingers? Or based on your IQ that can't even calculate the 14th root of a 16-digit number? Confidence alone could not solve any problem. In this game with 0 starting point, no doubt the sense of achievement would be far better than the normal situation, but the difficulty of victory was needless to say. In Wang Lu's view, the biggest and only chance in this game was that the other 4 forces were just puppets of the immortal dreamland, while he was the protagonist of this dreamland. When it came to the protagonist, it was not surprising to have a down-and-out opening. In the legendary story, all the powerful sages who had their marriage annulled at the beginning and were slapped in the face, all of them happily turned the tables and achieved an amazing feat. This was the protagonist's treatment. Of course, in this immortal dreamland, relying on the protagonist's halo to overcome everything was a moronic behavior. The so-called protagonist's treatment, in Wang Lu's view, only had one key point. The immortal dreamland would not deliberately create a deadly environment for the protagonist. The immortal dreamland might trap anyone, but it would not trap the protagonist. Although the current situation was desperate, in the future, there would certainly be a turning point. Otherwise, if the most powerful force, Golden City, couldn't think straight and launched an all-out attack on Grey Mountain, this game would be over. But even so, in such a dangerous situation, if he wanted to turn the tables step by step, he had to be extra careful. He couldn't make a single mistake. For the current Wang Lu, the first step he had to take was to seize his authority as a leader from Lan. This was the key to everything, and the biggest difficulty of this game was actually this. Wang Lu was used to leading a team to create miracles, but he had never experienced being led by someone else. This was because he had always believed in one thing: an incompetent general would tire the army to death. He would rather fight alone than have an incompetent leader above him. Perhaps Lan was not an incurably stupid person. Not being able to calculate a 16-digit number was not a sin that could not be redeemed by death. But compared to this grim game, Hayes indeed didn't have the ability to lead them to victory. Lan, if you really want to win, then promise me one thing. Lan nodded her head. Please say it. Throw away your master identity, become my follower, and follow my leadership with ease. In your dreams? Lan did not hesitate to reject Wang Lu's proposal, and there was an obvious unpleasant expression on her face. Wang Lu was not surprised by this. How could there be a leader in this world who was willing to obediently throw away his authority? Regarding Lan's unpleasant expression, Wang Lu just sneered and asked, do you think with your ability, it's possible for you to win the 5 Blood Spirit crown? Right now your only hope is me. Whether it's force or intelligence, only I have the qualification to be the leader. Lan was silent for a moment and then said, yes, perhaps your intelligence and force are above me, but I can't just hand over the leadership to someone else. In view of your previous behavior, I can't completely trust you. Who knows if you will surrender to other forces or not. Therefore, if you think your ability is higher than mine, and if you have any good strategy you can honestly put it out, I will seriously consider adopting it. Wang Lu interrupted. Yes, this is indeed the safe way, but do you think you have the qualification to choose the safe way? Right now, in this 5-party power struggle, Grey Mountain is already at an absolute disadvantage. In this case, only by recklessly gambling can we grab a chance. Seeking stability? That's the privilege of Golden City. Lan deeply frowned and said nothing. At present, there are only you and me in Grey Mountain. Do you still want to add internal friction in this situation? Interesting, I now understand why Grey Mountain could fall to this point from its former reputation of being on par with Golden City. The girl was still silent. She just kept staring at Wang Lu with her pair of clear eyes. Only when the latter began to consider the fee did she gently open her cherry lips. Very well, as you said, from now on, our master-servant relationship is terminated, and I will seriously listen to your instructions as long as it helps us win the 5 Blood Spirit crown. The girl's decisiveness was beyond the expectation of Wang Lu. He thought that it would take some effort to persuade Lan to give up the master-servant contract, but unexpectedly, after the girl made her decision, she didn't hesitate at all. And as she declared the termination of the master-servant relationship, on the back of the girl's right hand, a red light flashed and then quickly dispersed. At the same time, Wang Lu felt that the invisible binding force on his body also disappeared. The girl was serious in her work, not a delaying tactic. Wang Lu quite appreciated this. With a decisive teammate, at least he didn't have to worry that when he needed her, she would hesitate for all kinds of bullshit reasons and waste a good opportunity. Moreover, once this kind of person made a decision, it would not be easy to change it. Thus, Wang Lu didn't need to spend his mind on internal strife and could really free his hands to deal with the enemy. Originally, he thought that he would have to go through a lot of twists and turns, but now that he had passed this critical juncture, Wang Lu wanted to say something, but when he remembered that the back of the girl's hand flashed several times, he didn't know why, but he had a bad feeling. So, what was that on the back of your hand? Lan explained seriously, it's a blood charm obtained from performing a blood sacrifice summoning. It can be used to control and strengthen the summoned blood spirit. Wait, what did you say about control and what? Strengthen, Lan explained. Every summoner receives a different number of blood charms according to the blood sacrifice ritual. The blood charm is used to forcibly control the blood spirit, and if this control is used properly, it can strengthen the summoner. For example, I can use a blood charm to force you to listen to my instructions, and I can also use it to order you to do something that you can't normally do. Wang Lu immediately understood the use of the blood charm, but after understanding it, he was even more shocked. This is clearly a treasure that can be used at a critical moment to turn the tables. You actually used to suppress me? Lan's expression was calm and even seemed to be in the right. As you said, when there are only two of us, we can't have any internal friction, and an uncontrollable servant is not acceptable. So in order to reduce internal friction, you didn't hesitate to use 2 precious blood charms? How is this different from setting up an office to eliminate redundant staff in a governing organization? No wonder you're reduced to a commander without an army. By the way, how many blood charms do you have? Lan said, after the blood sacrifice of the remaining dozens of soldiers on Grey Mountain, I obtained 5 blood charms. 2 of them were used to suppress your mutation, so there are 3 more? No, in order to completely remove our master-servant relationship, I scattered the remaining 3. Scattered? Wang Lu couldn't believe his ears. He widened his eyes and looked the girl up and down, trying to find evidence that she was not mentally retarded. Yes. Lan stared back at him confidently. Didn't you persuade me to throw away my identity as the master and listen to your instructions? After weighing the pros and cons, I decided to believe you. Are you going to blame me for this? Wang Lu was silent for a long time. It took him a lot of effort to convince himself not to care too much about a mentally retarded person. In any case, the current situation was already bad enough. There was no need to worry about the loss of a few blood talismans when there were too many lice to bite and too many debts to worry about. So, what are we going to do next, Earth Spirit? Earth Spirit, what a good name. Wang Lu shook his head and then said, the first thing is to leave this place as soon as possible. Although there are still many doubts about this 5 blood spirit crown power struggle, but from common sense, I'm afraid someone will soon come to our door, and it's not suitable for us to immediately fight with the other 4 sides. Lan asked, come to our door? Of course. Golden City, Eternal Tree, Harmony River, and Flaming Valley, these 4 sides check and balance each other, so I'm afraid no one will easily make the first move. However, it's different to deal with Grey Mountain. Given the disparity in strength, we're simply a piece of dessert. As long as they can swallow me, the Earth Spirit, before the other 3, they will have a bit more initiative in the confrontation. If it were me, I would also come to harvest as soon as possible. Lan thought for a moment, nodded to show her understanding, and then asked, so where are we going? As she spoke, she didn't seem to be reluctant to leave Grey Mountain. During the competition for the Blood Crown, we shouldn't have the ability to sense each other's position, right? Lan said, at least I don't. Very good, I don't have it either, so let's assume that the others don't have it either. For a 2-person team like us, having fewer people is both a disadvantage and an advantage because it's easy to hide. As long as we can hide, it's impossible for the other 4 to not fight for a lifetime. When they fight, we'll have the opportunity to reap the benefits. Lan nodded in agreement. However, at the same time, a strange and slightly frivolous voice came from outside the hall. Reap the benefits? That's not good, right? At the entrance of the hall, a tall figure carrying a huge spear on his back slowly walked in. Although his pace was light, the gloomy murderous aura was like a substance, which extinguished the torches in the hall one by one. Chapter 399. It's really dilapidated. The man with the spear sighed with emotion as he walked. He carried the huge spear on his shoulder, which from time to time brushed against the wall, leaving behind sparks and harsh sounds. He broke into the headquarters of Grey Mountain alone, but he seemed to be strolling leisurely in the courtyard. His cold, murderous aura caused the temperature in the hall to drop to the freezing point. Even the torches were extinguished one by one, as if he was awed and subdued. In the past, Grey Mountain and Golden City were equally famous. Who in this world didn't yearn for it? However, after 100 generations, the descendants of common people Great Emperor actually fell to the point of reaping the benefits of others. It's really sad, so sad that it makes people despise it. As he spoke, the man finally walked forward and revealed his true appearance under the dim light. A man like a cheetah. Although his body didn't seem very strong, every inch of his muscles and bones contained infinite power. His blood and chi were like surging tides, surging with power. Wang Lu had no doubt that as long as he swung the spear in his hand with all his strength, he could pierce a mountain. This was a warrior who had tempered his body to the extreme. Although for cultivators the strength of the body was only part of the strength, no one could underestimate a warrior who purely tempered his body. Seeing the appearance of this man, Lan's whole body tensed up. As if facing a great enemy, she put a dark heavy shield in front of her, and beads of sweat glistened on her forehead. Seeing this, the man with the spear just sneered. In Wang Lu's view, Lan's strength was not too weak, but compared with the man with the spear in front of him, she was indeed like an ant. Once the fight started, even though Lan was fully armed, and the heavy armor on her body was no small matter, the man with the spear could still poke a hole through it. The man with the spear sneered a few times, then pointed the spear in his hand at the shield. The ancestors of Grey Mountain have done a favor to my Harmony River, so I really can't bear to see their descendants tarnish their name. Today I will destroy your Grey Mountain, so that the ancestors won't be ashamed of you. As for you, Earth Element Blood Spirit, if you want to blame something, blame your bad luck for actually following such a useless master. Before he finished speaking, Wang Lu felt a sharp light flash past his eyes. The huge spear was like a spirit snake, and in the blink of an eye, it had pierced into his chest. Just now, the gunman clearly focused all of his energy on Lan, but when he made his move, he went for Wang Lu first, which was really unexpected. Lan held the heavy shield and was on full alert, afraid that if she showed the slightest flaw, she would be shot down. She was confident that her strength was far inferior to her opponent's, but with the help of the heavy shield and armor, she should be able to hold on for a while. If she had joined forces with the Earth Blood Spirit, she might have been able to contend against it. But who would have thought that it would abandon her and go straight for the Earth Blood Spirit? She was so shocked that she couldn't react in time. She could only watch as the demonic spear, which had drunk the blood of countless heroes, stabbed towards Wang Lu. It's over. The opponent's demonic spear was so sharp that in this world, except for the Master of Golden City, perhaps no one could face it head-on. Moreover, when she summoned the Blood Spirit, she specifically prayed for a stalwart man, or a man with fiery and thunder-like attack. Only by combining this with her offense and defense could they have the possibility of going against the heaven. And a Blood Spirit that was good at offense but bad at defense, facing the thunder-like demonic spear, wouldn't it be? However, just as she thought of this, she heard a deafening explosion sweeping over, and then a violent airflow wreaked havoc in the main hall. She held the heavy shield in her hand, but she actually felt a little unsteady on her feet. However, through the violent airflow, Lan vaguely saw that Wang Lu was holding his sword horizontally in front of him, standing tall. Good swordsmanship. Amidst the frenzy, the gunman's praise could be clearly heard. To be able to block my spear at such a close distance is worthy of praise. But how long can you hold on? With that, the gunman took a step back, but it was a retreat in order to advance. The killing intent emitted from his body was even more intense. Obviously, he was preparing an unprecedented attack. Lan knew that if the opposite party went all out, perhaps she wouldn't even be able to hold on. However, she took this opportunity to take 2 steps forward, ready to stand in front of Wang Lu. Regarding this righteous act, Wang Lu frowned. Using his non-phase sword defense, he blocked Lan outside. Don't get in the way. Haha, good. You, this Earth Spirit, are actually a bit interesting, very much to my liking. If you can withstand my next move, after I kill that little girl and take away her blood mark, I will take you as my subordinate and let you fight with me. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was surprised. Turns out you're not a water element blood spirit, but the master of Harmony River. However, before his voice fell, the gunman, with a thunderous momentum, fiercely burst out his accumulated energy. The lightning-like spear, in a split second, split into thousands of light beams. The light flashed so brightly that people couldn't open their eyes. Then, the light beams converged into a torrential wave, which submerged Wang Lu in it. Obviously, it was a sharp and straight spear, but when it moved, it carried a strong water element spiritual energy, a combination of hardness and softness. Even if the opponent could withstand the first round of wind and thunder, he would still be submerged in the suffocating wave. However, as soon as Wang Lu pointed the sword of Mount Kuan forward, the billowing waves immediately collapsed as if they hit a reef. And no matter how hard the gunman tried to make the spear's momentum more difficult to defend, he was still unable to push the sword of Mount Kuan back even a little bit. For him, this was really a new experience. Powerful, really powerful. A powerful swordsman like you is rare in this world. In the billowing wave, the gunman's voice became more and more excited. Then take my last move. The gunman shouted and then withdrew the spear to his back. In an instant, the billowing wave that filled the hall disappeared without a trace. Only the tens of thousands of messy stab marks on the ground showed how fierce the attack and defense just now was. However, although the spear was withdrawn, it was for a stronger attack. This time, there was no longer an endless tide, but only a killing blow that concentrated all the power of the gunman. As the saying goes, dripping water can penetrate a stone. Even the softest thing, after years of penetration, is still unparalleled. And this gunman, who was born in Harmony River, wanted to penetrate tens of thousands of years in an instant, completely bursting out the power of the millions of years of water strike. Water is soft but also hard. He would definitely let this defensive swordsman understand this truth. However, just before he was ready to burst out with all his strength, a clear ice mirror suddenly blocked in front of him. The dense cold air made him tremble all over, and the killing blow that was originally ready to be launched could not be stabbed out, and was forcibly pulled back. "What are you doing?" Being interfered with, the anger of the gunman was self-evident. He turned around and pointed the spear behind him. Outside the hall, a girl in a blue dress strode in. Her momentum was menacing, and she faced the spear that was enough to stir up a storm without any fear. "Why are you asking me? I am saving your life, do you know that?" "Saving my life? Are you kidding me? Just now, I completely occupied the advantage on the field and the opponent couldn't move. Yuks. Go play on the side." However, the girl did not listen to his explanation. She stretched out her hand and directly swatted the spear to the side, and then passed the gunman and walked to the front of Wang Lu. Her pretty and lively face was 70% puzzled and 30% dissatisfied. "How come it's you?" The girl put her hands on her waist, making her waist more slender and graceful, but her face was depressed and irritated. Wang Lu tilted his head and thought for a moment. "I also want to ask you, this is obviously my immortal dreamland. Why did you come here to join in the fun, senior sister Zhou?" This girl who suddenly came was the lead disciple of Kunlun's sect, Zhou Mumu, who had just bid farewell to Wang Lu outside the group of immortal tombs not long ago. "What, your immortal dreamland?" Zhou Mumu was somewhat annoyed. "It's obviously mine, okay. It was not easy for me to persuade the elders to let me fight one-on-one, but I actually met you, a loser." Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. "What do you mean I'm a loser?" Zhou Mumu said, "If it were you and someone suddenly broke in while you were bathing and changing clothes, would you call him a noble person?" "Hey, how are you bathing and changing clothes right now? I'm going solo in the immortal dreamland, okay? It's very private, okay? Moreover, I thought I could easily win this time, but now that I met you, a loser, how could I win?" This exchange of words left Wang Lu speechless. While the two were quarreling, the gunman also came over and asked, "Do you two know each other?" Zhou Mumu peevishly glared at him. "If I don't know him, how could I save you in time? Do you know that if you really thrust your spear just now, he could immediately use his non-phase nameless sword to return it, which would make you deader than dead?" The gunman still shrugged his shoulders disapprovingly. Apparently, he didn't believe that not only could someone receive his full-strength blow, he could even bounce it back. "But since you two know each other, that's good. Tell him to surrender to me. Let's fight against Golden City together. This gray mountain has fallen so much that it's not worthy of such an excellent swordsman." Although his determined strike was stopped by someone, and he couldn't enjoy it to his heart's content, this gunman had been deeply impressed by Wang Lu's non-phase sword and wholeheartedly wanted to win him over. With that, the gunman also smiled at Wang Lu. "How about it? Do you want to join me? Just now, my two moves are not bad, right? At least they're much better than your current master." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu just smiled, walked to Lan's side and then reached out to pat her head. "My family's girl is indeed good for nothing. I've troubled you over and over again. Unfortunately, as her master, I can't abandon her just because she's good for nothing." That gunman was immediately stunned. "Master you?" Then his eyes turned to Lan, and he looked even more surprised. "Wait a minute, what about your blood marks? Don't tell me." After gawking for a moment, the gunman laughed. "You actually squandered all your blood marks. And then a blood spirit turned the situation around? Ha, although I've long guessed that the people of Grey Mountain are good for nothing, you're still far beyond my imagination." "Enough." Before the gunman's laughter ended, Zhou Mumu slapped his head. "You talk as if you're so great. If you have the ability, then use your blood marks to show off your master's authority." The gunman smiled and shrugged, but there was a bit of helplessness in his smile. Obviously, his relationship with Zhou Mumu was not as simple as master and servant. "But Wang Lu, are you really not going to consider joining hands? Based on this momentum, I think there's no need to guess who the other three followers are. The situation is not optimistic. Although there's only one winner in the end, isn't it better to be the second last to leave than to leave as soon as you come up?" Wang Lu sighed. "I say, instead of thinking about joining hands or not, it's better to think about this problem." With that, Wang Lu pointed his finger at the sky. "How are we going to survive under the full firepower of Golden City?" Outside the hall, in the sky, on the peak of Grey Mountain that towered into the clouds, thousands of golden lights shone continuously, like a golden cloud that shrouded the mountain. Chapter 400. Golden City? The golden cloud above Grey Mountain was mighty and mighty, like a celestial army that pressured in all directions. The boiling golden light was dazzling, blotting out the sky and making everyone present hold their breath. Golden City? Zhoumumu's eyebrows were tangled, showing a bit of irritation and uneasiness. This kind of battle formation, no matter how I look at it, it's like that group of nouveau riche from Xingjing sect. Tieske, their action is really fast. The master of Harmony River nodded again and exclaimed, "Amazing, really amazing. I single-handedly went down Harmony River to be the first to arrive. This time, Golden City has mobilized at least 100 gold-clad celestial soldiers, yet they are not a bit slower than me. This mobilization ability is really amazing." Zhoumu slapped him. "If you have the time to sigh at other people's fierceness, why don't you think about the current solution? You single-handedly killed your way here, but now that you're surrounded like a dumpling, I want to see how you're going to jump. Damn, this Grey Mountain has fallen for hundreds of generations, and now there's only a weak little girl in charge of it. Don't tell me I don't have to single-handedly lead an army to fight? Do I still have any face?" "You want face but you don't want your life." The master of Harmony River touched his chin. "Who let me be so handsome?" Zhoumu could not bear it anymore. She pulled out her diamond ring and smashed him to the ground. When the master and follower of Harmony River once again quarreled, Wang Lu had already walked out of the hall with a gloomy face and bathed in golden light. This was the first time he truly felt the strength of the most powerful force in this world, Golden City. The golden cloud above his head, in terms of power alone, did not surpass the level of King Pill. However, there was a world of difference between King Pill and King Pill. The weaker King Pill, Wang Lu could crush it with one finger, but the stronger King Pill, such as Chionghua, Wang Lu did not have much certainty in winning. As for his master's number 1 King Pill in 9 regions, there was no need to even mention it. In the golden cloud above his head, regardless of the low-level soldiers, there were more than 100 gold-clad celestial soldiers, and none of these celestial soldiers was weak, at least not weaker than the master of Grey Mountain Lan. This gathering of 100 people was no small matter. But what really made Wang Lu frown was the commander hidden above these gold-clad celestial soldiers. The strength or weakness of the commander directly determined the threat of these golden-clad celestial soldiers. If it was a general miscellaneous fish commander, Wang Lu alone could kill these more than 100 golden-clad celestial soldiers and 100 times more servant soldiers. Nanfei's sword was very good at restraining those tactics that relied on quantity to win. However, right now, just by looking at the overwhelming irresistible power above their heads, they knew that behind these celestial soldiers, there was a capable person helping them. Thus, the situation of this round was very ugly. The moment he saw Zhoumu, Wang Lu guessed that the followers of the other 3 sects were likely to be the lead disciples of Xingjing sect, Royal Soldier sect, and 10,000 Arts sect. This was really bad news because Wang Lu's biggest card to pass this test had disappeared. He was assigned to Grey Mountain, the weakest force, which, from the beginning, had an irreparable gap with the other 4 forces. And considering that after the beginning the other 4 forces would certainly try to swallow up Grey Mountain, this was simply a dead end. In Wang Lu's view, the protagonist treatment was the only guarantee to avoid certain death at the beginning. However, with the appearance of Zhoumu, this card was tragically overturned. Because compared to the other 4 lead disciples, even if he had the privilege of opening the group of immortal tombs, he was still far from the protagonist level. If there was no one behind Golden City, Wang Lu might be able to deal with it. However, as long as the other side was any of the lead disciples of the 5 uniques, this would be an unprecedented and arduous battle. How could the lead disciples of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League be ordinary people? Any one of them was not simple. Previously, Wang Lu had dealt with Zhan Zai and Zhoumu. Although at that time each of them had some advantages, Wang Lu also recognized that the other party was absolutely on the same level as him. Along with the advancement of their cultivation base at different times, there was no such thing as an absolute advantage. But now, if these people occupied the geographical position of Golden City, it would be difficult for him to make a comeback. However, just as Wang Lu was hesitating, he suddenly heard a voice mixed with surprise and anger in the sky. "Wang Lu, it's you." This voice was really familiar. Wang Lu remembered that not long ago, outside the group of immortal tombs, he had a conversation with the owner of the voice. The worst expectation really came true. Wang Lu somewhat helplessly shrugged and then waved at the golden cloud in the sky. "Yo, Sister Wang Yue, I trust you've been well since we last met." "Ah. I never thought you would have such a day. Above the golden cloud, Wanyu wildly laughed. Among the 5 spirits, the earth spirit situation is the worst. There is almost no chance of survival. I was curious about which lead disciple unfortunately became the earth spirit, but unexpectedly it's you. It's actually you. Listening to this unreserved laughter, Wang Lu could not help but wrinkle his brows. He inwardly thought that in the ancient sword tomb, did he really play too hard and turn this woman into this flesh-like collapsed face? However, since it was her, things were a bit easier to handle. Wanyu, this woman indeed had some ability. After not seeing her for several years, her cultivation base had greatly advanced. Right now she was already peak shoot on stage and at any time she could cross the king pill bottleneck. Speaking of which, her cultivation base was a bit ahead of Wang Lu. However, compared to Qianghua, it was like comparing a firefly to the bright moon. This time, Qianghua didn't personally come out, but instead sent Wanyu. Most likely, it was because she didn't want to take the risk of putting too much power on Grey Mountain. After all, Golden City was the #1 city in this world. While enjoying the convenience, it also had to face the unanimous targeting of the other 4 forces. If they were a bit careless, they would be overturned by the other 4 forces, and the gain would not make up for the loss. This cautiousness gave Wang Lu a chance. He could not deal with Qianghua who led the army of Golden City, but he might not necessarily be unable to deal with Wanyu who led the army of Golden City. Right now, the only problem was whether the rear was stable when he went all out to meet the enemy. What was the position of the master and follower of Harmony River? No matter how confident Wang Lu was, he didn't think he could face the joint forces of the 2 forces. And it was really difficult to fathom the intention of the madmen of Harmony River. However, while Wang Lu was hesitating, he heard a burst of cursing from the hall behind him. Are those bastards of Golden City here to take advantage of us? Bullying the few with many really King shameless. Before he could finish, Zhou Mumu's diamond ring once again swung at his head. I don't like to hear you say dirty words. You hit me again? Zhou Mumu ignored the angry glare of the gunman, but instead looked up at the sky and sneered. Xingjing sect people are really awe-inspiring. An inner court disciple also put out such a lineup. If other people didn't know, they would think that you're the lead disciple of Xingjing sect. Seeing Zhou Mumu, Wanyu was suddenly startled and somewhat at a loss on the golden cloud. When senior sister Qianghua sent her here, she didn't say that she would face 2 lead disciples. When she faced Wang Lu, even though she knew that she was far inferior to the other party in all aspects, anger could give her endless courage. However, facing Zhou Mumu, the title of the lead disciple of Kunlun sect really shocked her. However, at this time, a general wearing a fiery jade gold helmet beside her said, Madam Jin Ling, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If we can wipe out the 2 masters and followers of the 5 spirits in one fell swoop, our Golden City will immediately win. Even if the Earth Spirit and the Fire Spirit join forces, they are no longer our opponent. This is a great merit. Wanyu asked, with our manpower, do we have 100% certainty? I dare not say. After all, the opponent is the King of Harmony River. In terms of strength alone, I'm afraid they are not under any leader. However, they are, after all, alone. Our heavenly army has 108 heavenly soldiers, 12 heavenly generals and you, a gold spirit, keeping watch. Logically speaking, our strength is far above the opponent. The persuasion of the heavenly general finally made Wanyu make up her mind. Very well then, just as Wanyu was ready to order the entire army to attack, suddenly an unprecedented strong sense of crisis welled up in her heart. As an inner court disciple of Xingjing sect, even though there was a world of difference between Wanyu and the lead disciple, her basic skill as a cultivator was still very solid. Not good, quickly retreat? What? The heavenly general next to her could not believe his ears. Just now, with great difficulty, he persuaded this gold spirit to order the attack, but in the blink of an eye, she actually wanted to retreat? And with this hesitation, the last opportunity quietly slipped away. From the main hall of Grey Mountain, a man with a spear strode out, seething with anger. A group of shameless eyesore scum, taking advantage of the duel between 2 sides, despicably launched a sneak attack. Moreover, they even bullied the few and even caused me to be beaten by my followers. Today I want you to pay the price. All of you pay the price. The more the King of Harmony River spoke, the angrier he became. His anger seemed to condense on the spear in his hand. The surface of the water element spear surged up like a huge wave in the deep sea, and also like the rolling lava of a volcano. The two completely different forces of water and fire gathered together, brewing a terrifying and matchless eruption. Scum of Golden City, get out of here. With a roar, a bolt of lightning pierced the sky from the ground. The King of Harmony River threw the spear into the sky. The lightning pierced through the golden cloud, and the array formed by the golden-clad army could not withstand it. In just one strike it was suddenly pierced through. In a split second, more than half of the 108 heavenly soldiers were seriously injured and vomited blood. Several of them suffered a backlash that was too heavy and immediately died, falling down. The 12 heavenly generals were shocked. Blood-marked divine spear, this madman actually used the blood-marked divine spear. Before their exclamation fell, they saw the King of Harmony River beckoned in the air, and the spear that flew out from his hand appeared in his palm. Then, a red light lit up on the back of his hand, causing the spear body to once again surge with the power of raging waves and lava. Run. All troops, retreat immediately. This time, without needing Wang Yuelwanyu to say anything, the heavenly generals acted on their own and immediately led their men to flee. The golden cloud in the sky suddenly turned into countless threads of light and scattered in all directions. This was because they were afraid that the King of Harmony River would go crazy and chase after them. With just one spear, the morale of the golden-clad army of Golden City that originally had the upper hand collapsed. The power of this blood-marked divine spear could be clearly seen. Even Wang Lu also stared at it for a long time. Holding the sword of Mount Kuan in his hand, he chuckled and praised, "Eye-opener, really eye-opener." Upon hearing Wang Lu's words, the King of Harmony River was so happy that he danced with joy. "Aha, you have good eyesight. You're indeed worthy to be the man I like. Just now, when I defeated the enemy with one strike, wasn't I particularly handsome?" Before he could finish, a diamond ring smashed into his face. "Are you crazy? You actually used such a precious blood mark. Are you trying to show off how many blood marks you have?" The King of Harmony River crawled up from the ground, wiped away the blood from his nose, and then smiled brightly. "I look at foreign things as if they are muck, isn't that also very handsome? I will disfigure you today." Chapter 401. What do you think? This is the famous Harmony River in this world. Although it's named after a river, it's magnificent and majestic, which is very suitable for me. On the bank of Harmony River, a group of 4 people walked and talked. Not long after repelling Golden City, Wang Lu decided to give up Gray Mountain and form an alliance with Harmony River. In this regard, the master and his follower of Harmony River were happy to see this. Although in the 5 blood spirit power struggle the relationship between them was, after all, a competitive relationship, but when Shengjing's sect was so powerful, the alliance was imperative. The man with the spear walked in the front, and along the way his mouth never stopped talking. In this world, in terms of strength, Golden City is the leader, Flaming Valley is the second, and Harmony River and Eternal Tree are the last. However, we have always been like one. This Harmony River flows out from the void in the sky and eventually flows to the Eternal Tree. Half of the river water pours into the endless abyss behind the tree, forming the famous Harmony River waterfall. The other half is absorbed by the Eternal Tree, which is its source of life. And the Eternal Tree's roots stretch out, stabilizing the foundation of Harmony River and nourishing the creatures. The relationship between our 2 families is like that of husband and wife. If the 2 families join hands, even Golden City would have to think twice. Especially since the spear in my hand is invincible, even the master of Golden City would not dare to face it head-on. So far, you are the only one who can withstand my raging waves. Therefore, I am very optimistic about you. If you and I join hands in this 5-spirit power struggle, we can run amok. Putting aside the King of Harmony River's flaunting of his own force, this remark actually pointed out an important issue. The relationship between Harmony River and the Eternal Tree was far closer than what Lan previously said. Of course, one side of the story could not be completely believed. As they walked, Wang Lu asked, "Now that the situation of the 5-spirit power struggle is delicate, are you sure the Eternal Tree will not be disloyal?" Who knew that upon hearing this the other party just laughed. "Disloyal? Brother, you think too much. In this world, anyone can betray me, but the Eternal Tree absolutely will not." Wang Lu smiled and declined to comment. The King of Harmony River was indeed first class when it came to military bravery, but as a leader he had too many unqualified qualities. This kind of thing related to political wisdom, it was better to pretend that he didn't hear it. While they were talking, the group had already arrived at the core of Harmony River. They saw a bustling city on both sides of the river. Hundreds of barges were competing with each other on the river, and the city was bustling with traffic. What was even more amazing was that there was also a magnificent city in the middle of Harmony River. The people living in the city were humanoid creatures with gills on their cheeks. Looking at their clothes, the level of civilization here was not inferior to the city on the river. This is the essence of my Harmony River. Although it is not as prosperous as Golden City or magnificent as Flaming Valley, it is full of vitality and has a limitless future. Now that you have abandoned Gray Mountain, you might as well camp here so that you can appreciate my elegant demeanor from a close distance and surrender to me as soon as possible. Wang Lu pretended that he didn't hear anything and focused on the scenery on both sides of the Harmony River. Although this was only a part of the immortal dreamland, the design of this place was exceptionally fine. The three cities were located in three different places, but they were connected with each other. Whether it was the layout of the city or the residents, they were not crude decorations but living people, living cities. It was hard for Wang Lu to imagine that this was a temporary city built to give cultivators a test. Perhaps this was the same as Peach Blossom Village, a reenactment of some historical situation, which was why it was so exquisite and lifelike. It was just that. While he was thinking, he suddenly heard a burst of cheers. Wang Lu took a closer look and saw that his group of people had been seen by the people of Harmony River. The people in the city were crazily cheering and waving. "A Yi, it's a Yi. A Yi, come on. Come on. You can definitely win the 5 Blood Spirit crown, we all support you, A Yi." There were even some bold girls who enthusiastically confessed, "A Yi, we love you. You're the most handsome." Hearing this cheer, the king of Harmony River beamed with joy as he waved his spear and shouted, "I love you too. I love your vision." Wang Lu was dumbfounded. "Yi? Hee, it's my nickname." The king of Harmony River named a Yi nodded without any shyness and admitted, "Although it's a bit strange to be called by a nickname when I'm already so big, but since this name is also quite handsome, I don't care about it." Wang Lu was curious about another issue. "You're the king of Harmony River, but you're really approachable with your people." A Yi laughed and said, "I can't help it. Although some people have advised me to maintain the majesty of a king, everyone has watched me grow up, so I really can't be majestic. Moreover, I don't think there's anything handsome about being aloof and aloof. It's more fun to play with everyone like this." As soon as he finished speaking, A Ye's eyes lit up. It was an exceptionally beautiful girl in the city. She looked at him and covered her mouth with a faint smile. Between her eyebrows, there was a faint hint of a young girl's amorous feelings. A Yi immediately blew a whistle. With his powerful cultivation base, this whistle was enough to wake up half of the city. The girl was taken aback, but she couldn't help but shyly turn away. At the same time, many of the girls who had just cheered for a Yi and loudly professed their love immediately changed sides and began to try to throw eggs, tomatoes, and other things at him. A Yi laughed and didn't care. "Hee, it's still comfortable to be home." While speaking, A Yi stopped in front of an exquisite mansion. "We're home, come in and sit down." Wang Lu was surprised to see the small house in front of him. Although it was exquisite, its size was completely unworthy of the identity of a king. He asked, "Is this your palace?" A Yi shook his head and pointed to the distance. "The palace is over there, but I've always been too lazy to go there. Although it's a bit small, it's comfortable to live here. There aren't so many noisy people who want me to do this and that. Palace etiquette and state affairs, everywhere is uncomfortable. Moreover, it's clear that I'm the king and they're my subjects, but none of them are willing to listen to me. No matter what I say, they're always against me. I saw that some people live a hard life, so I said that we should simply exempt the taxes of Harmony River and then sell the palace to everyone to divide the money." They were so anxious that their faces turned red, so stingy. Wang Lu really felt sad for those ministers of Harmony River. "In short, this is my territory. I think there's no better place in this world than here, so don't think too much about it. Just quickly surrender. In any case, your Gray Mountain has already lost its home." Wang Lu smiled but didn't say anything. "Oh, are you worried about her?" A Yi pointed at Zhou Mumu. "Indeed, I already have a blood spirit." Before he could finish, Zhou Mumu's shapely eyebrows raised. "You said one?" A Yi ignored her and continued, "But I think you're more pleasing to the eye than her, so as long as you're willing to follow me, I'll immediately kick this woman away. I guarantee that in the end, no one will compete with you for the 5 Blood Spirit crown. How about it?" Regarding A Ye's warm invitation, Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This A Yi was born in Harmony River. Sure enough, water entered his head when he was a child, and he dared to say anything. As for whether to accept his invitation or not, this was not a problem at all, because before Wang Lu could answer, someone else had already answered for him. Kick me away? You really dare to say that, and in front of me? Zhou Mumu's diamond ring smashed at him without any trace of politeness. Yi resisted with the spear in his hand and argued, "You, this woman, are fierce and stupid. You hit me every day. If I don't kick you, who else should I kick? I was really blind to recruit a trash like you to be my blood spirit. Damn, you're rebelling." Seeing that the two sides were about to fight again, Wang Lu coughed and said, "Yi, I have a question to ask you." Yi immediately broke away from the fight. "Go ahead." Upon seeing this, Zhou Mumu somewhat reluctantly put away her diamond ring and waited for Wang Lu to speak. In her mind, Wang Lu's magical performance in the ancient sword tomb had left a deep impression on her. In terms of immortal cultivation, Zhou Mumu was confident that she was not inferior to anyone. However, as for this 5 blood spirit crown competition, she trusted Wang Lu more. "Yi, what's the significance of this 5 blood spirit crown to you?" Upon hearing this, Yi was startled, and then he frowned and thought hard. After a long time he said, "In my opinion, whoever wants that thing can have it. I don't *king care about it. I'm living a good life in Harmony River. As long as you don't bother me, whoever wants to be the king of this world can go ahead." Wang Lu couldn't help but be curious. "This explanation is inconsistent with your behavior of being the first to arrive at Grey Mountain." Yi waved his hand. "It's not that I want to go. My wife is still at home, so I had no choice but to go. However, at first she insisted that I lead the army, or at least bring my personal guards. I didn't listen to her. Everyone knows that there's only one little girl left in Grey Mountain. Wouldn't it be shameful for me to bring so many people there?" "Wait a minute, you have a wife." Wang Lu was really surprised. "What's wrong?" Yi was surprised. "I'm so handsome, isn't it natural for me to have a wife? Moreover, my wife must be one of the most beautiful women in this world to be worthy of me. Oh, by the way, I also have 2 children. Although they're not as handsome as me, they're still among the most handsome men in this world." "You also have children?" "Aha, of course. I'm a man among men. If I don't even have children, how could it be? It just so happens that my wife and children are back. I'll introduce them to you." With that, Yi suddenly walked out of the courtyard and called out, "Wife, come quickly, there's a guest at home." Wang Lu looked at the direction of Yi's finger and saw a green cloud slowly descending from the horizon. A woman in an emerald green dress stood on the cloud with a graceful posture. Behind her were 2 twin brothers who were holding hands. The woman really had a peerless elegance. Her beautiful eyes moved as she smiled at Wang Lu and the others. Her smile made all the flowers on the banks of Harmony River pale in comparison. However, what really surprised Wang Lu was that the woman's wood element spiritual energy was as vast as the sea. The woman looked delicate, but in terms of strength she was probably not inferior to a Yi. And in this world, to have such a cultivation base. He beautiful, right? A Yi flaunted, "The leader of Eternal Tree, Sacred Leaf, Shaman, is my wife." Chapter 402. The leader of Eternal Tree, the Sacred Leaf, was the wife of the king of Harmony River? Hearing Ye's explanation, Wang Lu finally understood why this man, whose IQ was suspected to be seriously defective, confidently said that the alliance between Harmony River and Eternal Tree was unbreakable. It turned out that the 2 forces were actually connected by marriage. With such a relationship, with a Ye's temperament, he would indeed think that the alliance between the 2 forces was unbreakable. Wang Lu thought that a Yi would say, "I'm so handsome," which ally would be willing to abandon me. It was obviously not the first time that Zhou Mumu saw the sacred leaf of Eternal Tree. Hearing Yi showing off, she sneered and said, "Be careful, your wife is now your competitor." In the context of the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown, it is not uncommon for husband and wife to turn against each other. As a result, Yi laughed and said, "I'm so handsome, my wife would not be willing to betray me." Zhou Mumu disapproved of this and even sneered. However, she also knew that Yi was a person who was easy to talk to in other areas, but once he decided on something he would not turn back, especially when it came to his handsomeness. Therefore Zhou Mumu was too lazy to say more. She sneered a few times and then ignored him. Not long after, a green cloud descended from the sky, and the sacred leaf shaman of Eternal Tree appeared in front of the crowd with the 2 children. She then nodded slightly to Wang Lu and Lan. Shaman's posture was graceful and elegant. Even the most demanding person could not find anything wrong with her. Compared to Shaman, Yi was much more enthusiastic. He directly ran over and hugged Shaman, kissed her deeply on the cheek and then touched the two children's heads. Amidst the children's cheers, he carried them on his shoulders and pointed to Wang Lu and Lan. These two are the earth spirit Wang Lu and the waste girl from Grey Mountain. Come say hello. The two almost identical little boys smiled and waved at Wang Lu and Lan, but did not speak. Yi explained, don't look at how big they are actually only 1 year old. They can't speak but they are very sensible, much better than me when I was a child. They completely inherited their mother's specialty. In the future, one of them would be the king of Harmony River, while the other would be the sacred leaf of the eternal tree. The alliance between the two would be even more unbreakable. Hey, the luckiest thing in my life is marrying a good wife and giving birth to 2 good sons. While speaking, Ye's eyes revealed a strong sense of attachment and love. However, just as Ye was immersed in the happiness of his family, an untimely voice rang out. I'm hungry. Lan touched her stomach and said coldly. Yi was taken aback and then coldly and arrogantly said, there's no food for waste here. Before he could finish his words, he saw the eternal tree's sacred leaf frown slightly. He's a guest. Upon hearing this, Yi was shocked. His frosty expression immediately melted and was replaced with a flattering smile. He said to Lan, if you're hungry, come to my house for a meal. Come, follow me into the house. With that, he walked into the house. Alas! As a Yes follower seeing this scene, Zhou Mumu could only sigh. However, Wang Lu looked at the couple with interest. While following Yi into the house, he said to Shaman, usually it's hard to take care of him, right? Shaman smiled reservedly. Yi is very sentimental. His words and deeds may be inconsistent with secular etiquette, but he always does things from his heart. I think this sincere heart is the most valuable, so he never feels that it's hard. Wang Lu nodded and then, seemingly unintentionally, asked, I see that Yi is not interested in governing the country. Do you usually help him take care of a lot of things? Shaman was startled, but Yi, who was walking in front of her, had already answered, it's all Shaman's help. She is now in charge of the state affairs of 2 countries and is often very busy. But if I really have to deal with those state affairs, it would be very annoying. Oh, then you really have a good wife. Wang Lu said and gave Shaman a meaningful look. The woman looked at her husband affectionately and said, this is a Yes trust in me. Others only say that he is incompetent in governing the country, that he is muddle-headed and ignores the state affairs, but who can really have such a free and easy heart? And with such a pure heart, any miracle is possible around him. Wang Lu said with a smile, saying that he is so good, are you trying to help your husband recruit me? I thought your position would not be so gentle. Shaman slightly lowered her head but then changed the topic. Not long ago I forced Yi to go to Grey Mountain. I told him that there are many variables in the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown. Even with the joint efforts of water and wood, it cannot guarantee absolute safety. And among the 5 forces, Grey Mountain is the weakest. If we can eliminate Grey Mountain and collect the Earth Spirit power, we can then truly be in an invincible position. In fact, until now, I still think that this judgment is not wrong. But since Yi brought you back, obviously he has his own judgment and I, no matter what, will always respect his will. Wang Lu said, even when it comes to real power, isn't it obvious that you, the queen who manages the affairs of the 2 countries, is superior? Shaman said, between husband and wife, how can everything be decided by the strength of the authority? I respect him and love him, what does it have to do with power? While talking, the group had crossed the exquisite courtyard and entered the house. Yi led them straight to the dining room. There was a round table in the hall. He didn't pay attention to the hierarchy and just casually asked them to sit down. Then he clapped his hands and shouted, little ones, there are guests in the house, bring out your best skills. Not long after, a group of dwarves in white clothes and white hats came out of the kitchen. With comical movements, they brought all kinds of fine wine and delicacies to the table. Although these chefs were unprepossessing, their culinary skills were amazing. The dishes on the table were not delicacies, nor were there any expensive ingredients, but they looked, smelled, and were all rare and precious delicacies. In particular, the wine on the table was even more extraordinary. It was said that Yi himself personally collected the river essence from the deepest part of Harmony River, picked evergreen leaves from the eternal tree, and brewed it with abundant rice. When it first entered the mouth, it was hot and unbearable, but when it entered the stomach, there was a trace of coolness, which made people feel relaxed and happy. At the table, the topic gradually deepened as they toasted each other. Perhaps Yi brought Wang Lu home just to drink wine and make merry with the person he liked, and to connect with each other. However, at this table only a Yi and Lan were truly immersed in the joy of wine and food. A Yi kept drinking, while Lan, with an elegant posture and amazing speed, swallowed most of the food on the table into her stomach. Except for these two weirdos, the rest of the people had their own thoughts. Even Wang Lu only tasted the food and spent most of his time talking with Shaman. Between the husband and wife, the one who could really make the decision was Shaman. Don't look at how willful a Yi could ignore Shaman's request and act arbitrarily. However, if Shaman insisted that a Yi kill the earth spirit at all costs, would a Yi refuse? At this time, the peace was nothing more than Shaman herself feeling that maintaining the peace was more beneficial. After all, that was then and this was now. Since they realized that Wang Lu was not the kind of opponent that could be easily dealt with, then Harmony River and Eternal Tree naturally needed a living earth spirit as an ally. And the topic on the table was mainly about the alliance in the 5 blood spirit crown power struggle. This dispute has made this world turbulent, and it is difficult for any party to stay out of it. And now the power of Golden City is too strong, and it is difficult for any party to contend against it. Only by joining forces and forming an alliance would there be a chance of survival. However, as far as I know, in most of the history, when several weak forces confront a strong force, even if their total strength is far above the strong force, in the end they would still lose more than they win. This is because the weak forces are always unable to cooperate sincerely. Instead, they each have their own ulterior motives and even drag each other down. At the dinner table, Shaman gently sipped the wine brewed by her husband. She temporarily let go of the reserved sacred leaf and, in a straightforward manner, explained her understanding of the situation to Wang Lu. Regarding Shaman's analysis, Wang Lu nodded in agreement. Indeed, the alliance between the weak forces, no matter how much effort is put into managing it, will always have many flaws, and then be broken one by one. After all, the hearts of the forces are different, and it is impossible to be like a powerful and unified force. Therefore, from your point of view, persuading a Yi to go to Grey Mountain to harvest the earth spirit power is indeed the right choice. According to the rules of the 5 blood spirit crown power struggle, when any blood spirit was killed, the killer would obtain the blood spirit power of that blood spirit. And when 4 of the 5 spirits were lost, the blood spirit that gathered the power of the 5 spirits, as well as the master of that blood spirit, would obtain the 5 blood spirit crown and henceforth rule the world. And during this period, the successful killing of the blood spirit would rapidly improve one's own strength. Although it would inevitably be accompanied by losses, it was, after all, a power that was in one's own hands, which was stable and solid. Shaman said, "Now, among the 5 spirits, we have already gathered 3 of them, which is more than half. However, in fact, our comprehensive strength is only slightly better than Flaming Valley, and it is still not enough compared to Golden City. At present, the best strategy is to unite with Flaming Valley to contend against Golden City. However, the situation of Flaming Valley is very special, and the difficulty to unite with them is extraordinary. Moreover, as previously analyzed, the more forces that unite, the more difficult it is to maintain the cohesion of this alliance. When the time comes, not only would we not enjoy the convenience of the alliance, we would even suffer from it." Wang Lu said, "So in your opinion?" Shaman said, "In my opinion, it's best for Golden City and Flaming Valley to go to war. When both of them are mutually wounded, we can reap the benefits." Wang Lu laughed in spite of himself. "This is too whimsical. Right now, whether it's Golden City or Flaming Valley, obviously, we are the priority target. They have 3 blood spirits, but their comprehensive strength is mediocre. If it were me, I would never let go of such a suitable target while fighting a unified powerful force endlessly." Shaman somewhat mysteriously smiled. "But what if they have a reason to go to war? Once the war starts, it would not be easy to control. Although the strength of Flaming Valley is only 60 to 70% of Golden City, the 5 elements mutually restrain fire and metal. If they go all out in a war, Golden City would not have the ability to end the war quickly and would definitely fall into a quagmire." Wang Lu asked, "Do they have a reason to go to war? They didn't before, so I'll just give them one." Just as Wang Lu asked this question, a hearty man's voice came from outside the dining room. Faster than the sound, a flash of lightning flashed into the room and gradually turned into a clear figure at the dining table, which cheerfully smiled at Wang Lu. "Long time no see, junior brother Wang Lu." Wang Lu looked at that figure in surprise, got up and said, "The Flash? Junior brother Wang Lu, I haven't seen you for several years, don't tell me you don't recognize me?" Zhan Zai was inexplicably sad and indignant. Chapter 403. Upon hearing the words junior brother Wang Lu finally realized the identity of this person. You. Wang Lu looked at the person in front of him in surprise and could not help but stand up. From the familiar magical power fluctuation of the thunder body, Wang Lu finally confirmed the identity of the other party, which was the lead disciple of 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai. It was not surprising to see Zhan Zai here. Among the 5 lead disciples of the 5 sects, 3 of them had already been determined. Wang Lu belonged to the earth element Gray Mountain, Zhou Mumu belonged to the water element Harmony River, and Xianghua was the luckiest. She was assigned to Golden City, where she had the best geographical advantage. Only the lead disciples of Royal Soldier Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, it was unknown who was assigned to Flaming Valley and who was assigned to Eternal Tree. However, based on Wang Lu's current understanding of this immortal dreamland, Zhan Zai was obviously more suitable for Eternal Tree. It was just that, after a few years, Zhan Zai's change was so great that Wang Lu didn't recognize him at first glance. In fact, no matter how forgetful Wang Lu was, he still remembered the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. However, compared to the exchange between the 2 sects on Spirit Sword Mountain, Zhan Zai's change was simply earth-shattering. In terms of magical power cultivation base, a few years ago, Zhan Zai was close to Shudan Stage Foundation Establishment Stage. But now he was only peak Shudan Stage, which was the same as him. In terms of cultivation base, he was actually not as good as him. However, the general stage classification method had always been invalid in front of the lead disciples of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. Although Zhan Zai was peak Shudan Stage, his thunder body was more than 20 layers, which was enough for him to look down on the vast majority of Taoist Master King Pill in the world. Even Wang Lu himself was deeply shocked when he saw that instantaneous movement just now. He was confident that his non-phase sword art's defensive power was number 1 in the world, but in the face of an unusually fast opponent, relying on his non-phase sword art alone, he only had the power to protect himself. However, compared to his cultivation base advancement, the real change was reflected in his temperament. After not seeing him for a few years, Zhan Zai seemed to have been reborn, from a young and inexperienced teenager to a young man who could take charge of an area. This was completely different from the common arrogance of the cultivators of 10,000 Arts sect. After all, other disciples could be isolated from the world and concentrate on their own research, but Zhan Zai was the lead disciple of the 10,000 Arts sect, the future successor of the sect leader. In addition to having a high cultivation base and profound knowledge, he must also have the ability to lead the entire sect. After a few years of experience, he was getting closer to his master, Supreme Tianluan. In this regard, Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh. None of the chief disciples of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League were easy to deal with. If they didn't work hard enough, they could be surpassed by others no matter in what aspect. However, as the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, Wang Lu's own progress was not inferior to anyone. Even if Zhan Zai had undergone earth-shaking changes, he could still talk to him with confidence. Senior brother Zai, you've changed a lot in the past few years. Upon hearing this, Zhan Zai's eyes lit up and he said proudly, "Haha, you also noticed? I grew a beard." Zhan Zai flaunted his 2 to 3 inches long beard on his chin. According to my research in the 10,000 Arts sect, growing a beard can effectively change a person's external image. More than 70% of the female respondents said that they think a man with a beard is more mature than a man without a beard. And in the historical records before the Age of Chaos, there was an exceptionally beautiful beard, like a senior with 4 eyebrows. His affinity with the opposite sex was very good, and in his life, there were many beautiful women. In addition to his unique personality charm, his iconic beard was also an important factor. A few years ago, I tried to pursue junior sister Lu Li, but to no avail. Later, I turned to pursue other women, but the progress was also not smooth. Thus, I thought of growing a beard, and now it seems that it really works. Halfway through his words, Zhan Zai seemed to realize that he had gone off topic. He hurriedly gave an apologetic smile to Wang Lu, and then cupped his hands towards Sacred Leaf Shaman. Shaman, however, did not care about Zhan Zai's intimate conversation with Wang Lu and just nodded to Zhan Zai. Zhan Zai said with a sinking voice, "Madam Sacred Leaf, I have completed all the tasks according to the plan. Now that the war between Golden City and Flaming Valley has begun, the Flaming Valley Legion has set foot on the territory of Golden City, and our chance to reap the benefits is right in front of us." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. Golden City and Flaming Valley have already started a war? The 2 most powerful forces in this 5-way power struggle have actually started a war? Shaman, however, seemed to have already expected this. She said with great satisfaction, "Very good, indeed worthy to be the spirit of all blood spirits." Zhan Zai said, "This is not my credit. It's just that Golden City and Flaming Valley have long had a grudge. They both regard each other as their biggest opponent and wish for the other party to die quickly. When the situation forms a delicate balance, they can still maintain restraint and not fight each other. However, this kind of balance based on multiple restraints is too fragile. Long-term hostility has made both sides tense up and ready to fight at any moment. As long as there is a little change, it could cause a landslide and tsunami chain reaction." Seeing that Wang Lu didn't seem to understand much about this and even had some objections, Zhan Zai took the initiative to explain. Indeed, according to the research data, in most similar situations, before the two opposing giants come into direct contact, they would usually choose a third party as the wrestling field. In this way, regardless of victory or defeat, there would be room for mediation. And from this theory, when Golden City and Flaming Valley are mutually restraining each other, Harmony River, Eternal Tree and Grey Mountain, these three forces are instead the most dangerous. However, this point has been revised after many discussions with Madame Sacred Leaf, because Flaming Valley can't be measured with common sense. They are a group of irrational, warlike lunatics who take pride in challenging the strong. Over the years, they have repeatedly provoked war against Golden City. Were it not for Flaming Valley setting up a group of elders composed of several great sages, who would constantly stop the unplanned behavior of Flaming Valley, they would have died thousands of years ago because of their warlike nature. However, the role of the group of elders is limited. If they encounter a situation that is intolerable in the eyes of Flaming Valley, no one can stop their war. By this point, Wang Lu had already guessed what exactly Zhan Zai did. "That's right," Zhan Zai said with a smile. "I used 10,000 methods comprehension to imitate the spell of the golden-clad celestial generals of Golden City and massacred a sentry post at the border of Flaming Valley. This immediately aroused the monstrous anger of Flaming Valley." Wang Lu couldn't help but chuckle. "It's really simple and crude." It's indeed simple and crude, but under careful examination, it's actually full of flaws. However, as long as they can't guess that I have 10,000 methods comprehension, they can't explain the spell that I used to massacre the sentry post. The spell of the golden-clad celestial generals of Golden City is unique. In this world, no one can cultivate it, let alone cast it. Therefore, since the people in the sentry post died under the spell of the celestial generals, then the killer must be the golden-clad celestial generals of Golden City. Thus, it's imperative for them to retaliate. Thus, I conveniently helped them by imitating the summoning of the heavenly fire of Flaming Valley and burned a city on the periphery of Golden City. After that, no one could stop the fierce battle between the two sides. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu suddenly asked, "How strong is Qionghua's control over Golden City?" Zhan Zai said, "Junior brother Wang Lu is indeed a smart person. You directly asked the point. According to my understanding, Qionghua's control over Golden City is very poor, almost zero." "Oh?" Zhan Zai said, "This is probably the balanced strategy of the immortal dreamland. In the 5 spirits power struggle, each of us 5 lead disciples corresponds to one of the forces. Among the 5 forces, Golden City is the strongest, and among the 5, Qianghua is the strongest. Moreover, she is different from us. Her entire team entered the immortal dreamland." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu interjected, "How many people from Qionghua's team actually came?" "So many people. Who exactly is the gold spirit?" 36, each of them is a gold spirit." Zhan Zai said, "As for Qianghua herself, she is the king of gold spirit." "King of gold spirit? There's such a rank? Why do I feel like we're not playing the same game?" "Yes, a strong alliance that leaves everyone else behind. But how could there be such an unfair thing in the world? Qianghua has a great advantage, but she also has a great hidden danger. Her team and the Master of Golden City are not on good terms. Not only can they not cooperate sincerely, they even plot against each other. In this case, no matter how brilliant Qianghua is, she can't display it. Let alone, as far as I know, she can't even protect herself." "Can't protect herself?" Wang Lu was somewhat curious. "Golden City is too strong, so strong that they think that even without the assistance of the blood spirit, they can still win this power struggle. Therefore, Qionghua's team is not important to them. On the contrary, those people from Xingjing sect who are accustomed to being strong are variables that are difficult to control, so..." Speaking to this, Zhan Zai shrugged his shoulders. "Let Xingjing sect people experience the troubles of a strong alliance. Next, we just need to prepare to watch the fight and wait for the result of the decisive battle between Golden City and Flaming Valley. As for the showdown between you, me, and Senior Sister Zhou, let's wait until after both Xingjing Sect and Royal Soldier Sect are eliminated. With that, Zhan Zai revealed a relaxed posture. He sat at the corner of the dining table and began to drink heartily. However, Wang Lu was not so optimistic. Would things be that simple? The opponent is Qiong Hua, and her endless miracles in recent years are not just based on public opinion. If this situation can make things difficult for Qiong Hua, then she doesn't deserve to be the lead disciple of Xingjing Sect. Wang Lu closed his eyes, thought for a moment, and then suddenly stood up. I'm going out for a walk. With that, regardless of the fact that the banquet was not over yet, Wang Lu walked out of the door. At the same time, in the distant Golden City, in a quiet and spacious hall, a beautiful girl sat upright with her eyes closed in rapt attention. Although the hall was bright and spacious, it was isolated from the rest of the world, like an empty prison. Suddenly, the girl seemed to be aware of something. She opened her eyes and softly muttered to herself in a distant voice. Sure enough, it's the strategy of driving the tiger to swallow the wolf. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.